Good morning. Let me try that once more. Good morning. Thank you. I appreciate that. Our first general session will come to order. Welcome. For the benefit of those who might not have been with us last night, I'm Alan Galloway, NACAA President. We are glad that you are here. There is a lot of good information that will be shared this morning. As of this morning, we have a little over, we think, 1,400 total attendees at this conference. Yes, we are proud of that. Of those, over 800 are active members, which is a little over 25% of our association, which is a very high percentage of active members at an annual meeting. And one of the neatest numbers to me is we have 162 first-time attendees at this conference. Absolutely. We certainly hope all of them see the value in being here, and if you're one of those first-time attendees, we hope you learn a lot this week and see the value that many of us have seen over the years from attending these. It happens to be my 27th annual meeting, and I'm proud of that number. We hope that this week is everything that you folks imagine it might be as you looked at the program before you came. We encourage you to take advantage of all the many breakout sessions we have. The exhibit hall has got a great number of exhibitors in it this year. Now that program book can be a little bit overwhelming at first. Please don't hesitate to ask any of us that are a little gray around the edges. We'll gladly try to highlight to you the things we feel that are most important to make sure you don't miss those, and that you get the most out of this meeting that is possible. We hope you continue seeing the value in this association and this annual meeting, and will help encourage others to attend as you go forward. I want to move along with our program. And first, I want to tell you a little bit about the first two gentlemen that you'll hear from today. I want you to know they're a couple of squires. Now, some of you are thinking of the wrong definition of the word squire. You're thinking I mean starchy or inflexible or old-fashioned, and that's not what I mean at all. Now, for those of you that's ever done any carpentry work, any woodworking, you've probably used a carpenter's square. And you know that it's used to mark a line across the board when that square is put in place properly. And that line then acts as a guide, so that when the saw does its work, the cut will be accurate and the finished product will be of high quality. Now, I've had the pleasure of knowing these two gentlemen for a few years. And like a carpenter's squire, I've observed their talents. And they have the ability to provide thought-out guidance, and then the wisdom to step aside and watch the work take place and know that will be accomplished with high quality. I'll introduce our first individual, for his comments, and then I'll let him introduce our second speaker. To help welcome us to Tennessee and share a little bit of our university's Institute of Agriculture is Dr. Tim Cross. Dr. Cross holds a bachelor's and master's degree in agricultural economics from Oklahoma State University and a PhD from Oregon State. He joined the Tennessee faculty as a specialist in agricultural economics in 1994. And after a stint as our Extension Associate Dean for Agricultural Programs, he later served as Dean of Extension and was the Dean when we first bid to host this meeting a few years ago. He completed that duty in 2016 and became the Chancellor of the Institute of Agriculture. We're proud to have him in that position. So please welcome to the podium one of the best two squires I know, Dr. Tim Cross.
Thanks so much, President Galloway. Been called a lot of things, but square's not one of them recently. But, I take that as a sincere compliment and really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I would say welcome, except you've already been welcomed at least 5 times. So let me just say, rather than welcome, how honored we are to have you here in Tennessee, here in Chattanooga, as a part of this 2018 NACAA annual meeting. It really is a privilege for us to host this, and I hope you have a great experience while you're here. I think you've probably already noticed the great planning that's gone into this meeting, and I really want to brag on our Tennessee Association of Agricultural Specialists and Agents. They have done an outstanding job, it appears to me. They have landscaped, it appears, most of the city of Chattanooga, including every inch of this convention center. And you know, that doesn't just happen. It takes a heck of a lot of planning. Jeff Vai and David Yates have been pestering me for 4.5 years now about how we're going to support this effort. And you know, that's their job. That's what they needed to do, and they and their whole team have done a great job, I believe, pulling this together. And our agent association includes not only agents, but our specialists as well, and I think that's a good thing in this day of diversity and inclusion. I'm glad to see the faculty and our specialists involved in the association. And even more importantly, it includes not only University of Tennessee extension agents and specialists, but also our great friends and partners from Tennessee State University, are members of that association as well. And I know they've pitched in and been a big part of planning and carrying out this meeting too. Leading those two organizations, you met Dr. Robert Burns briefly yesterday evening, and I want to recognize and brag on him. He just does a great job leading the organization, planning for the future, making sure the programs we deliver are really benefiting the farmers, families, and youth that we serve across the state. Also, Dr. Chandra Reddy, who leads the College of Ag programs at Tennessee State University, along with Dr. Lateef Lagari, the administrator for the extension programs. That group works together extremely well to really deliver a joint and coordinated program statewide, and it's always a pleasure to see those programs take place. We've had really strong support in preparing for this meeting, and again, I think that's probably pretty evident, but I want to brag on a couple of folks in particular. One of them you'll hear from shortly, Commissioner Jay Templeton of the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. They're always right there when we need them, helping us with regard to the educational programs we conduct, the research that's carried out, and even the service that's conducted across the state. So Commissioner Templeton and his staff have just been so supportive over the years of all the work that we do, and again, you'll hear more from him in a minute. I have not seen him here today, but Senator Jim Tracy was a big help to us in planning this meeting. He, I should say former Senator Jim Tracy, he's now the director of our USDA Rural Development office here in Tennessee, but in his role with the General Assembly, he was instrumental in helping us to gain some financial support for this meeting. And those of you that have been involved in planning a national meeting know how helpful and how important that is. So I want to brag on both of them. I'd also say I could go through a list of at least 20 or 30 other important partners that I know are listed in the program, that are represented in the trade show, that are prominent in this week's meeting. And we couldn't do this kind of a meeting, and more importantly, we couldn't do our extension programs without their support. I've also seen members of our FCS and 4-H programs here this week, and I know they have stepped up and assisted in this meeting in several different ways and will throughout the week. I also hope some of them are back at home keeping the office open while all of you all are here, because you know, the rest of the world doesn't stop when our agricultural agents get together. So it's good to have teamwork and make sure that we're doing all that's needed in our local offices, even while we're investing time and effort in this professional development opportunity. UT Extension is one of 4 units, major units in the Institute of Agriculture. Dr. Burns touched on it just a little bit last night. The other major units in our institute include the Herbert College of Agriculture, the College of Veterinary Medicine, and our Ag Research Unit, who conducts all of our agricultural experiment station programs. Those 4 units all comprise the programs that we deliver throughout the institute. The Herbert College coordinates all of its academic programs through the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and we're proud to have students from that college involved in this week's efforts as well. We were established as an institute in 1968, so we're marking our 50th anniversary this year. And we were really set up as a separate but a joint campus with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. We have the opportunity then as an institute to really be responsible for responding to stakeholder needs, stakeholder interests, and doing what those that we serve thinks best suits their needs with regard to research, extension, and teaching programs. And we're fortunate to have a College of Veterinary Medicine that gives us such strong connections with animal health, animal welfare, and other animal-related topics that really expand and complement the agricultural programs that we offer. We have about 1,500 undergraduate students, 300 plus graduate students, and 345 Doctor of Veterinary Medicine students. So we've got a diverse and a robust student body. It's a growing student body. We've had modest growth probably for the past 8 years straight. And I attribute that to what I call a bit of a renaissance in agriculture. You know, 20 years ago it wasn't so cool to be in agriculture, but these days with the interest in local food, the interest in health and nutrition, and the interest in how food is produced, I see agriculture being one of those up-and-coming fields. We know there's a job shortage with regard to graduates and the number of jobs that are out there. And I also know that extension plays such a big role across our country in meeting those needs in terms of responding to new opportunities in the field. So I really think it is a great time to be in agriculture, and it's a wonderful time to be engaged in extension work as well. Our faculty includes about 265 faculty members across those 4 units that I mentioned, and they're complemented by another 600 professional staff, and we've got about 1,700 employees total. And that's a formidable force, I think, to bear influence on a state like Tennessee, and I'm sure your state in college can quote similar numbers. And as you think about having 1,700 people focused and really intent on advancing agriculture, youth development, family and consumer science programs, it's really encouraging to think about the impact that we can have, the influence that we can have across our various states. Dr. Burns regularly reports 4 to 5 million contacts through our extension offices, and they certainly lead the university with regard to our outreach efforts, our educational efforts in the field. But we also recognize that there are other partners in the university system that we can work with, and we take every opportunity to do that. We're proud of our 180,000 plus 4-H members. We're still a club-based 4-H program, and we believe among the largest in the country. Through that kind of an organization, we're still in the schools, and we think that's a good thing. We can complement the curriculum that our schools feel are important, the testing standards that they've established. We can help those teachers teach to, and we can use examples from STEM, from agriculture, and from other sciences to really complement their educational objectives. Our institute tagline is Real Life Solutions, and I think that's appropriate because if you think about our Institute of Agriculture, real to me implies relevant, and we always try to remain very relevant, very applied, meeting actual needs that are out there. The life part of our tagline, you know, we believe we're very instrumental in addressing quality of life issues, whether it's through education, workforce development, whether it's through improving health and nutrition, or whether it's through increasing profitability on our farms. Our lives, or our programs influence lives across the state. And then the last word, solution. You know, if we weren't developing and delivering solutions, I'm not sure we'd have the support that we have across this country, in particular here in the state of Tennessee, for what we do. So real life solutions is what we're focused on, and it's such a pleasure to see those real life solutions play out day in, day out across the state. Our ag industry has grown. We're up to about $4 billion in ag receipts, and we hope that we've contributed to that growth through our research, extension, and teaching programs. I think about the changes in agriculture that have occurred since we last hosted this meeting, which I attended in 1996 in Nashville, Tennessee. And I think if you'll think back to what it was like in 1996. Think about the changes you've seen in agriculture, in the ag industry. What did we know about precision farming in 1996? What did we know about antimicrobial resistance? What did we know about climate in 1996? Huge changes that have occurred, and you have been a part of those changes. You've been helping our producers to adapt to and respond to those changes. And I have seen great changes in our extension programs since that time as well. I hope your time here at the meeting this week will help you to get ready for the next 20 years and the changes that we will no doubt experience in the industry in the coming years. I recall that 1996 meeting. For those of you that were here, it was at the Opryland Hotel. I think we may still have some folks over there walking around lost since that meeting. It was a massive facility, still is. But this particular facility I find very functional, very easy to navigate. I hope we don't lose anyone from this meeting. So let me get about what I was really asked to do, and that was to introduce my boss, the president of the University of Tennessee, Dr. Joe DiPietro. Joe is serving as the 25th president of the University of Tennessee system. He was appointed on January 1, 2011, and that was following a 5-year appointment as our chancellor of the Institute of Agriculture. In other words, prior to being president, he held my job. Performance reviews are just a load of fun with Joe because he knows exactly what I should have been doing last year. He's always quick to understand the challenges we face, to appreciate the value that we provide statewide. He always recognizes and supports what we're up to, and his presence here today is a great illustration of that. Joe's background is in veterinary medicine. He's a veterinarian specializing in veterinary parasitology. He grew up in rural Illinois, and he's usually quick to describe that area as not so different from some of the rural parts of Tennessee, perhaps more similar to West Tennessee than East Tennessee, a few less hills in Illinois. But he'll also, if you'll talk to him a few minutes, tell you stories about how he spent the majority of his career at the south end of a northbound horse. So if you think about that a little bit, you can have some interesting conversations about his background and experiences as a veterinarian. It's been a real pleasure and a real privilege for me to serve the past 12 years under his leadership. He is a great friend of the Institute and of the University of Tennessee as a whole. Let me introduce to you Dr. Joe DiPietro.
Good morning. Thank you, Chancellor Cross. I don't know where to begin. I mean, if there are people from Illinois here, I grew up in Coles County, so I don't know if we have any agents from Coles County, but most people hear my surname here in Tennessee initially and thought he's got to be from Chicago, and it's the furthest thing from the truth. I grew up in a county about 185 miles south of Chicago on the same side of the state. And yes, I did practice in a private practice after I got out of veterinary college in a little town called Peatone in Will County, Illinois. And that was a really unique experience because that practice was about 80% large animal in those days, and the caseload in a day, you could see everything from a chinchilla to a Brahma bull in a single day. I learned a great deal about people, I learned a great deal about veterinary medicine, and I learned I don't like messing with Brahma bulls very much. And then, having grown up working on a family farm, in high school renting a piece of ground to maintain my livestock on, I'm matriculated from high school and went to the University of Illinois, and at that place in Champaign-Urbana, I really had the opportunity to grow and understand what a land-grant institution was about. As I went through that program, I had a great mentor who told me I'd be back, and sure enough, I went back after 2 or 3 years. I went back to graduate school, did a fellowship, worked in the hospital. But the real reason I'm here today is to talk to you about this institution, the University of Tennessee system. And the system has been around the same number of years as the Institute of Agriculture, 50 years. The components of the system include campuses in Knoxville, Chattanooga, Martin, and Memphis, the Institute of Agriculture that Chancellor Cross leads, and the Institute of Public Service. Collectively, we have about 50,000 students in the system, and we have about 18,000 employees. And we say our tagline is everywhere you look, UT. And through our extension offices, our IPS efforts, the Institute of Public Service, we have a presence in every county. And indeed, we're about solutions and bringing them to the people through our extension operations. And these offices, I like to call them the front door of the university that you walk through in your local community or county to get help. And there's nothing that thrilled me more in studying parasites, particularly in large animals, than being part of an extension presentation somewhere when I worked at Illinois and had the opportunity to be in front of producers and have a question come up about taking care of a parasitic infection in their animal. And I could say to them, we know from a study we just did the last 7 or 8 months that if you treat that cow with this drug, she's going to get better. That was really land-grant mission fulfilled. And it works both ways, because often I'd go to those meetings, and you all see this every day in your offices as agents, and somebody would ask me a question about treating a parasite, say in a horse, and I wouldn't know the answer, I wouldn't have done the study, and if you heard it often enough, what I typically would do is first I'd trot off to the library, the veterinary medicine library, and figure out whether anybody had done any work on it and had an answer, and if not, then could I find or secure the funding to figure the answer out to that question, particularly if it was a big problem and I'd heard it repeatedly over and over again. Our unique mission here sets us apart as an institution collectively from any other public institution in the state from the standpoint of our outreach and our contact with people day in, day out. It's incredibly helpful to the University of Tennessee system, and it doesn't matter which component of the system you're at or work at, it is incredibly important when it comes to advocacy. And I don't know about your state, but in our state, advocacy with our General Assembly becomes more and more important every year. The ability to work and have contact with people in every county is an incredibly valuable aspect of being able to work with our General Assembly, because all politics is local, and typically we have people everywhere who, in the state, who can help us with the General Assembly when we need that, whether it be funding or other issues that we face. As a land grant, we have a commitment to do that. We've not backed down from that at all in Tennessee, and largely because this is a relatively rural state, and the model that we have, a county-based model, continues to be the one that we prefer. Some other states have moved away from that, but we feel because of the importance of agriculture in our state and the importance of serving the people all over the state, that we want to continue without doubt and hang on to that model, and it works really, really well. Lastly, I would tell you I hope that you take something away from this meeting that you can take home and use and help the people you serve. And now I'd like to introduce a man in Tennessee who needs no introduction, our Commissioner of Agriculture, Jay Templeton. Jay grew up on a family farm in McNairy County, which is southwest Tennessee. It included timber, cattle, and row crops. He has been commissioner since 2016. He was deputy commissioner from 2011 until 2016, and is indeed not only a true friend of agriculture, but also the University of Tennessee. You might not know that in Tennessee, the Commissioner of Agriculture has a seat on our Board of Trustees. It's really helpful to have an agricultural perspective on our board from the standpoint of the commissioner, and we really valued his input, his encouraging us to make those contacts, those 4.3 to 5 million contacts we make every year through UT Extension. And without UT Extension, we wouldn't be able to do those at all. And it really makes us soar. Jay has led planning for the state around agriculture that is heralded as the best we've ever seen. He's indeed a friend of Extension and the Institute of Agriculture and the University of Tennessee, Commissioner Jay Templeton.
Well, good morning to you. On behalf of Governor Bill Haslam, welcome to Tennessee. I hope you've had a great time while you're here. Hasn't the agents with TSU and the University of Tennessee system done a tremendous job in planning this event for you today? As I walked down last night and I saw the decorations, I realized how much work really went into it and the efforts that were put there. And Dr. Cross mentioned that this has been discussed for several years now and how to get this done. And one thing I noticed that maybe you all did not notice, but really they took it to heart. All of those Jack Daniels bottles were once filled with product. And that means that our dedicated ag extension agents in Tennessee, for you all to have the best possible experience, sacrificed their monies, their time, and their efforts to empty those bottles so they could be brought here for decorative purposes. So I hope you recognize that. Well, again, welcome. Thank you for what you do. Dr. DiPietro mentioned that I grew up on a farm in West Tennessee, timber, row crops, and beef cattle. Not only did I grow up on a farm in West Tennessee, I still farm in West Tennessee. And that just, to me, brings home the personal connection with what you all do on a daily basis. Not only going back to my youth as a 4-H student, and I could mention 2 or 3 agents that really had an impact on my life as I worked my way through several of the projects into adulthood. But today, the reliance that I have through your research efforts, through your hands-on advice, in my particular case, in my county from local extension there, thank you. Because all of us, and regardless of where we may be, I think, in life, we fail to sometimes recognize the impact that we have on other people. And I think as you get involved in camps, as you get involved in complaints, as you get involved in trying to come, in some cases across the country, to a week-long convention, that you may sometimes lose sight and not really understand how much you are appreciated and the impact that you have every day on the world of agriculture, and not just agriculture, but just the positive influence you're having on lives overall. So I want to give you a personal thank you for all of your efforts. Tennessee Department of Agriculture, we are pleased to rely on partnerships as we do with Tennessee State University, University of Tennessee, Farm Bureau, all of the producer groups that you might imagine that we have at hand in our state. With what we do on a very limited budget with limited resources could not be done if it were not for those partnerships. And I hope in your state that you have that kind of relationship, that it's not that no one is in the lead and no one is a follower. In Tennessee, it truly is a partnership. I can tell you we make very few decisions, whether they're to develop business in Tennessee related to agriculture, whether it's of the regulatory nature. We make very few decisions without consulting our partners with the land grant institutions, producer groups, and other stakeholders. And if that's not the way it functions in your state, I would sure encourage you to take the leadership role and try to make that happen. I was thinking about the theme that you have here today of this week: cultivate, innovate, and celebrate. And that's exactly what we attempt to do in this industry of agriculture in Tennessee. We are just in the midst of a growing season, as you all are, with the 67,000 farm families across this state are in the midst of growing their crops in hopes of a bountiful harvest. As we think about innovation at the Department of Agriculture, and I would encourage you to take a few moments, if you would like, to go by our booth today or this week, learn more about our Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, Ag Enterprise Fund, and what we're doing with a program we call Ag Launch, where right now we have 16 model farms across Tennessee that we've married up with some innovative and entrepreneurial type technology. Not just to give those farmers the opportunity to say, hey, I was first, but hopefully to give them an equity position in some promising companies. And then celebrate. Congratulations to you for being here, for celebrating, because every day in Tennessee, whether they know it or not, 6.7 million people celebrate what 67,000 farm families do. And because of that, the industry of agriculture in this state is our #1 industry. It represents almost 13% of our state's economic engine, roughly $82 billion. Again, we could not be there if it weren't for the hardworking men and women on the farms of Tennessee. We could not be there if it were not for the extension personnel. We could not be there if it were not for our governor and an extremely supportive legislature. So thank you again for taking time to come to Chattanooga, beautiful southeast Tennessee. Don't leave here without making a memory and going to see Rock City and Ruby Falls. You will be disappointed and will never forgive yourself if you don't go take in those two wonders of the world that we have here in southeastern Tennessee. Thanks for being here. As you pass through Nashville, if you're in there anytime, always feel welcome. Stop by Ellington Ag Center at the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. We'd be glad to have you. And Alan, if you wouldn't care to step up in commemoration of your service the past year, and obviously you have done a tremendous job, represented Tennessee extremely well. On behalf of Governor Bill Haslam and the citizens of the state of Tennessee, I would like to present to you a flag that was flown over our state capitol in your honor in commemoration of your service. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much to all three gentlemen for being with us tonight. Commissioner Templeton, President DiPietro, Chancellor Cross. It means a lot to all of us in Tennessee Extension to have the kind of support that we receive from our administration and from the Department of Agriculture. And I am fairly certain that many of you are wishing you had individuals like that in your state as well. Sometimes we don't enjoy those sort of privileges, but we have a great group of support in Tennessee, and that really makes life a lot easier to us. At this time on the program, I am, as the president, asked to give a report to the membership. And that's exactly what I want to follow up and do. Since all of our activities throughout the year are posted on the minutes of our NACAA website, I will endeavor to give you a brief status report and mention some highlights from the past year. First, NACAA is a solid association both financially and programmatically. Thanks to the wise, conservative financial management of past boards, we have been able to establish a comfortable rainy day fund to protect our association in the event that some calamity might ever cause an annual meeting or other event to be canceled. One of our future challenges is to determine how best to put to use any additional revenues above what we need in that rainy day fund. And that's one of those items that the board will be looking at in this coming year and going forward, was ways that we can put those funds to use to enhance our professional improvement programs that will enhance the abilities of our members. Our committee structure in our association remains flexible and allows us to make changes each year as we see the needs to improve things and do what our theme talks about, innovate. Sometimes committee names even change, and we did that this past year to one committee to help clarify the program areas covered by that particular committee. We must continue to make changes and adapt our professional improvement programs to meet the changing needs of our members and their clientele. One of the ongoing challenges in today's business economy is maintaining our sponsorship needs. And you may have heard yesterday that we've had sponsorship, strong sponsorship this year for our programs. With constant consolidation that occurs out in the agricultural industries, there are simply fewer companies out there who understand and value what we do every day. One significant change I made to the board, or request that I made of our board members this year, was that for every board member to be involved in soliciting sponsors. I ask each of them to contact at least one new potential sponsor. Many of them bump that up to 2, 3, and more. Now, while we knew we wouldn't be successful in obtaining sponsorship from all of those individuals, we wanted to attempt to get our foot in the door, at least make sure they knew who we were and what we were about and the services that we provide to our clientele. We were fortunate to obtain one new $5,000 donor. And we also assisted indirectly Tennessee with finding a $5,000 sponsor for this meeting that will likely become a national sponsor in years going forward. And Tennessee also received another $10,000 in like-kind donations from that same sponsor. So many new sponsors now have a better understanding of NACAA, and the possibility, hopefully, of securing them in the future is greatly improved. Scott Hallbaker, our executive director, is highly involved in helping put together things like our registration for one, but he also puts together information packets for any potential new sponsor so that they have a good idea, a good background for what we are and what we do. His knowledge of that application process to sponsors and knowing the best contact procedures with those various businesses is truly invaluable. All of us need to take time to express our appreciation to the sponsors and donors that are listed in the program book. They make it possible for us to conduct many of our awards and recognition programs, and we would be in a much tougher situation to do that without them. On the membership side of our association, when the official number was certified back in February, we were down a little bit in total membership this year. However, as typically happens, we have members join throughout the year, and at last count, we were up to 3,190 members nationwide. One bright note in that is we have recognized for the first time in a number of years a member from the state of California. That gentleman moved from another state where he was an active member to California, and he is helping us, hopefully, to reinvigorate the membership from California, and hopefully we can recognize that they have many coming from there in years ahead. One other change implemented this year was related to the annual meeting, and that was the shortening of what we will participate in Wednesday morning at this general session. I basically looked at the program and looked at ways that we might be able to provide more breakout sessions, and about the only way you could fit it in was by cutting something else. So I basically removed half of our Wednesday morning general session. Now, don't take that to mean that you shouldn't be here Wednesday morning, because we're going to have an excellent, shorter Wednesday morning session that I think you will want to be here for. But cutting that session a little bit time-wise allowed us to add 24 more breakout sessions for members like you to do presentations, so that the other members here can hit a wider variety of potential programs of interest to them that, again, will help them when they get back home. It's strange how numbers work out sometime. This is the 103rd annual meeting. But if you look back in the early years of our association, 2 of our early presidents served multiple terms to help get our association off on the right foot. And strangely enough, I have the honor and privilege of being the 100th president of NACAA. I am constantly encouraged by the interest of our members to be involved and provide suggestions and input to our board and to our committee members. It takes a large number of members to keep this association moving forward. I hope that every NACA member will look at ways to be more involved in their state and national association by serving on committees and higher positions. The more one learns about how our association works, the more involved you are likely to become. I greatly appreciate the opportunities that I've enjoyed this year, and I look forward to serving next year as the past president. It's now time for our sponsor and donor recognition, and I want to call on our President-elect, Richard Fechter, to share that information with us this morning. Richard.
Thank you, President Galloway. As your President-elect, it's great to be here this morning to be able to recognize our sponsors and donors. as we know those help make our AMPIC possible through support of our professional improvement, professional development, and of course our recognition and awards programs. They also help throughout the year in our various webinars, newsletters, and many other ways in keeping us up to date with the latest information, technology, and other things. As Alan mentioned, this past year he charged the board members with contacting at least 1 to 3 or 4, however many ever we wanted to, potential new donors. He mentioned we secured 1 new donor, Smithfield Foods. They sponsored our National Committee members' luncheon yesterday afternoon. Although that was the only new donor we secured, we planted many new seeds, and hopefully those seeds will grow, and in future years we'll get some more financial commitments from that process. I'm honored to recognize we have a few donors that have reached some milestones this past year in being donors for years to NACAA. If we have any of those people here when I call them off, if they could stand up to be recognized. 15 years as a donor to NACAA is Farm Credit. A 25-year donor is the National Pork Board. And reaching 35 years as a donor is Altria Client Services. As members, it remains critically important that we show our appreciation to our donors and sponsors, and to make sure they know how valuable they are to us as NACAA. This can come not only from thanking them individually, but also applying for the various award programs that they help sponsor. I encourage you to take time to visit our trade show and the many donors and exhibitors that are over there. A reminder, the Tennessee agents, they're sponsoring. They have lots of door prizes that they're giving out if you get your card stamped by all of the vendors. They have a very nice arrangement of gifts that you can win in their drawing if you do so. So now if you turn your attention to the video screen, we'll recognize all of our 2018 donors and sponsors.
The National Association of County Agricultural Agents would like to thank the following donors and sponsors of the 2018 Annual Meeting and Professional Improvement Conference. BioAdvanced SPM Life Science, Farm Credit, Syngenta Crop Protection, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, SARE, Bayer Crop Science, Pipeline Ag Safety Alliance, Explorations by Thor Custom Agricultural Tours, Altria Client Services, American Income Life, Dow AgroSciences, Livestock Marketing Association, National Pork Board, National Crop Insurance Services, Smithfield Foods Incorporated, FDA Center for Veterinary Medicine, Tennessee General Assembly, UT Extension Institute of Agriculture, the University of Tennessee, Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation, Tractor Supply Company, Chattanooga Convention and Visitors Bureau, Jack Daniel's Distillery, Tennessee Farmers Cooperative, UT Ag Research, Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Community Economic Development, UT Extension, Aviagen, John and Sarah Campbell, Dell, Flower City Nurseries, Smart, Tennessee, Oklahoma Association of Extension Agriculture Agents, Sunbelt Ag Expo, Tennessee Agritourism Association, Tennessee Wine Growers, Tennessee State University College of Agriculture, the Fertilizer Institute. Thank you to our 2018 NACAA and Tennessee donors and sponsors.
Once again, thank you to our donors and sponsors.
Thank you, Richard. Each year we get to hear from any state that is wishing to bid to host the future NACAA meeting 4 years in advance. I've had the pleasure of being in communication with the members of the group that's about to present to you, and they began the research and the city's selection process in attempting to determine whether they would be able to come forward with a bid for the year 2022. They encountered the challenges that many states have, and they got a special challenge because they had multiple cities in their state willing to host us and had the capability of hosting us. And so they had to narrow that list down, and that's a good challenge to have, you might say. But I'd like to welcome to the stage Libby Johnson and Sean Steed from the Florida Association and Ashley Medeiros from the Discovery of Palm Beaches.
Hello everybody, we are really excited to be here to present our video and tell y'all a little bit more about beautiful West Palm Beach. I'm really hoping that we have a whole lot of people that want to come and join us in a wonderful location that is probably not known by many of you. Don't be too sad that we're not going to Orlando. You're going to pass by it, but you're going to love West Palm because the beach is very nearby. The Florida Association of County Agriculture Agents is about 160 agents strong, and they're all very enthusiastic. We have a lot of them sitting over here that just can't wait to welcome many of their new friends that they've met here with you guys. So with no further ado, we're going to show our video that will take you beyond the beaches and show you the Florida that we know. The Florida Ag Agents invite you to the Sunshine State for the National Association of County Agricultural Agents 2022 AMPIC in West Palm Beach. With more than 88 million visitors annually, it sure seems like everyone knows about Florida's beautiful beaches and theme parks.
But did you know the economic impact of Florida agriculture is second only to tourism? And our ag agents are excited to share the Florida we know with you.
The Florida I know is home to one of the nation's largest environmental horticulture industries that is pioneering in best management practices to protect our water resources.
You know, we don't always spend our time stopping to smell the flowers. In fact, the Florida that I know is ranked second in the United States for the value of vegetable production and number one in crops such as fresh market tomatoes, cucumbers, snap beans, sweet corn, bell pepper, spring harvested potatoes, and my favorite, watermelon.
The West wasn't won on a salad, and Florida wasn't founded on the vegetable industry. The Florida I know is home to 4.5 million acres of pasture land and grazed woodlands that are used primarily in cow-calf production and home to over 1 million head of cattle.
You know, not all mamas let their babies grow up to be cowboys. Some of us have our heads in the pines. In the Florida I know, there are over 17 million acres of working forest. That's almost half of Florida's land.
But while you are out there pining away in the woods, we have better things to do, like explore the Florida we know.
Florida is a leading producer in sustainable aquaculture, harvesting over 100 million tons of fresh seafood annually.
Florida is also home to over 700 freshwater springs, the largest convergence of springs on the planet and producing over 90% of Florida's drinking water.
It's hard to saddle up a kayak, but the Florida I know is home to more than 400,000 horses. Marion County, horse capital of the world, has more horses than any other county in the United States.
In the fruit and berry industry, we don't have time to horse around. The Florida I know has nearly 437,000 acres of citrus, and 90% of that production is in orange juice. Cheers.
I agree. Florida orange juice is pretty sweet, but the Florida I know grows the sweetest crop around, and that's sugar cane. We have 400,000 acres of cane in South Florida, and most of it is grown right here in Palm Beach County. Did you know that our Florida farmers produce about 1/4 of America's sugar supply?
So what are you waiting for? Come on down to the Florida we know and let us take you beyond the beaches.
Make your plans to join us at the beautiful West Palm Beach Convention Center in 2022. The West Palm Beach Convention Center is centrally located with resorts, shops, and restaurants, all within easy walking distance. There will be lots to experience and so much to do. We're looking forward to seeing you at the 2022 AMPIC in West Palm Beach.
So you all may be wondering where you will be staying when you come to Florida in 2022. So we'll be at the Palm Beach County Convention Center located in West Palm Beach. The hotels that you will utilize while you're there is the Hilton West Palm Beach, which is actually connected to the convention center by just a short 25-foot step walkway, and then the Marriott West Palm Beach, which is located just down the street, about a 5 to 7 minute walk away. Maybe you're wondering, how do you get to West Palm Beach? We do have the Palm Beach International Airport, and that's about a 5-minute ride from the hotels. We do also have the Fort Lauderdale International Airport, which is about a 45-minute ride away. And then what do you do when you're in West Palm Beach? Of course, we have the beaches. About 2 miles away are the beaches, and then a little bit closer than that is the Intercoastal Waterway. And then just across the street from the hotel is City Place. So there's over 50 shops, restaurants, and entertainment venues there. So you'll definitely have a lot to do when you're in the area. We look forward to seeing you in 2022.
And just a little bit more about Palm Beach County. It's our leading agricultural county in the state of Florida with $1 billion in agricultural receipts. We do cattle, horses, rice, sugarcane, ornamentals, tropicals, vegetables, fruits, and sod. And it's centrally located in the southeast section of Florida, and it's easily accessible to other parts of the state. It's a couple hours drive to Orlando. It's right next to the East Coast beaches, Fort Lauderdale, Miami Beach. The Keys are only a few hours away. The West Coast beaches, Fort Myers and Naples, is just a few hours away on the west side. Also, we've got locked-in rates at the hotel, extremely favorable rates for us. They're going to start at $159 at the Hilton and $144 at the Marriott. The facilities are wonderful. The people at the convention center are really easy to work with. They did a great job showing us around. And one last thing is that our agents and our administration are fully on board, and we're eagerly awaiting 2022 to come by. So thank you.
So we would like each one of you to come and visit us at the trade show booth. We're going to have some special snacks, some Cubanitos, thanks to Wendy Wilbur's group, some mango salsa, if you haven't had mango salsa, some special chips and other random types of food. Please come and join us there, and we really look forward to seeing each and every one of you at our national meeting in 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby, Sean, and Angela. We appreciate that information. Looking forward to it. You know, one of the challenges of putting together the program for this annual meeting is selecting the keynote speaker that fits the need. Now, I had 3 criteria when I started that process. I wanted somebody that understood agriculture, maybe that grew up in it. They also should hopefully have an understanding of extension and extension work and what we do. And I also want them to have a feel for or knowledge of our clientele and maybe what their needs are all about. I wanted somebody that was down to earth, that was willing to address the challenges that we face with our clientele and maybe how we should address those challenges. I believe I found the right guy for the job. Dr. James Pete McConnell was raised on a diversified crop and livestock farm about 45 miles west of where we're sitting this morning. As a 4-H'er, he participated and was even involved in a trip that took him to the National Poultry Judging Contest in Chicago. He attended the University of Tennessee, where his final degree was a doctorate in animal science. He spent 34 years teaching at Clemson University. I met Pete there almost, I hate to admit this, 38 years ago, while I was a graduate student at Clemson. Now, I never had the privilege of taking one of his classes, but I'm sure there are members in the audience who did. And based on my conversation with a few of those over the years, I've been told that when you took a course under Dr. Mack, as they called him, you not only learned a little bit about the subject that you were being taught, you also learned a little bit about life as well. So with no further delay, it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium today to share with us Dr. James Pete McConnell. Need some water, there's some right there. All right, thank you.
Over hill, over dale, as we hit the 4-H trail, we club members come swinging along. Let it rain, let it shine, we will keep a steady line. We club members come swinging along. Now here's my favorite. With a high, high he o'er the hills of Tennessee, shout out your numbers loud and strong. Where'er you go, you will always know we club members come swinging along. Key note. Hope I hit the right keys and the right notes. Why did I do that? One of the privileges of getting old, and you must never have a speaker who is old, because one of the things they're going to do is reminisce. And the first thing that happened to me when Alan asked me about giving this talk was to say, well, my goodness, where did my contact with Extension start? And of course it started with 4-H, and that's a song that we sang. And so as I thought about that, the monitor came up, the music came on, and in my head was this thing that I just presented to you. And I thought that was kind of cool. So did 4-H have an impact on me? I think so. I was going to ask you how many of you remember fond things from 60 years ago, but I knew I'd just get blank faces for the most part. And it even struck me that one of the things that I'm up against is some of your parents weren't even born 60 years ago. So please bear with me as I reminisce. I was born on a general ag farm back in that day. 150 acres would grow a family, build a house, and a series of barns and sheds and farm houses and all those kinds of things. And it was possible for a man to pay for them. And so that was the environment that I was raised in. If you came off of Mount Eagle Mountain and came to Chattanooga, on the interstate, that interstate unfortunately ruined one of the most beautiful valleys in Tennessee, that valley just immediately south of Mount Eagle Mountain. Beautiful, deep, sandy loam soils, very productive. A drought was something we never heard of. I only heard of droughts after I went to South Carolina. Sometimes we'll go 60 days with almost no water whatsoever. This has been a beautiful year for growing. I've been all over Tennessee this year. One of the most fantastic crop years I've ever seen, and I'm sure we're all blessed. We need all that food that we can produce, and our challenge is going to be to do better and better and better at that as we go along. In that little valley where I was born, there were at least 10 farm families, and it was kind of a unique time in history because those 10 farm families all had kids about the same age. So there was a large group, probably as many as 30. Not all of those were farm kids. Some of them were on pieces of land that was not fit for farming. They'd built houses and lived there. But anyway, there were about 30 kids that were all about the same age. So there was a great nucleus there for 4-H activity. And part of that happened because those same kids went to church, so they interacted there. There was a community center that was very active. The farmers of the community got together once a month and had a meeting in a big old abandoned schoolhouse. And so that community center was a hub for a lot of our activities. Adjacent to it was a ball field, so we could go out there and play ball, and right next to that was a cold, clear trout stream that we could swim in, and so we had all the things that kids needed. And it was just an ideal place. I don't think I've ever been in an environment any more favorable to my pleasure than that particular environment was. So on the farm, we worked all the time. It seemed like that's all we ever learned to do, and that was a good thing. Self-sufficiency was one of the bywords. We never sent a single implement or a single car or anything that I ever remember to the shop. My father's philosophy was, if somebody put that part on, I'll get it off. And that's exactly what he did. So we didn't have the modern day distractions. We are ruining our world, folks, with the distractions that we've created. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and I don't like to talk about those things, but they're part of the reality of who we are. In those days, there was no TV. I think it was about mid-50s that we got the first TV in the community, which was quite a hit. We became quite a focal point for a lot of people to come and visit, and that was good. Had a party line, 8 people on the same line. Nobody got to talk, so we weren't distracted by all those things. But when you have kids, you got to have leaders, and leaders are the things that are so hard to identify. And there are leaders that are out there. I talked recently to a fellow from Sevierville, Tennessee. He'd moved down from Indiana. And he said, the worst part of moving south is that I've always been involved in 4-H, and I can't find any place that I can get involved. He said, not only me, but my wife and my 2 grown children would love to get involved in that. So there are people out there, and part of the challenge that we're going to talk about today is how in the world to get to those. But we needed leaders, and fortunately, or maybe it was unfortunate for the 2 ladies that were involved. My mother was one of them, and my aunt was the other. And they were very, very competitive extroverts. And not necessarily did they like each other, but they were able to work and cooperate with each other. And so in that competition, we were the benefactors of it because they pulled us into everything that you could think of. And then when I was about 15 years old, a new extension leader came into the county, Mr. Rural Peace. Some of you know him. He had a stellar career in Tennessee Extension Service. But anyway, immediately, somehow he made contact, and I wished I could reminisce back and tell you how as a new agent to get in and make the contacts that he obviously made. But he had us on a poultry judging team, and we did quite well with that. We'd never been out of, really over 100 miles away from home. So to board a train, take a long trip to Chicago, spend a week on the streets of Chicago was just something that it's a fairy tale, really, to go back and get to do that. And then we were on the forester judging team. I got kind of a kick out of looking through the exhibits out here. They had a tree that was labeled as a black gum, and I said, no, that's a sweet gum. I know those things. I bet you I can tell you 90% of the trees that are in the forest today, and I learned that in 4-H, and that was something that we were just sponges for information, and it was information that has served well over a very, very long period of time. So don't you wish you could start out with that kind of environment? I'm just thankful that I got to do that. Well, when it came time to graduate, I, and very much like several of you, it was the first generation for people to leave the farm and go to universities, and ultimately to wind up on the university faculty was something that was just never thought of. But I can so vividly remember getting in the car and going to Knoxville, Tennessee. That was, again, a long trip, 150 miles, and my dad and I went, and we were taken by the local farmer home administrator at that particular time, and he was very big on college and on educations, and so he encouraged us to go, and I'll never forget Dr. Webster Pendergrass, who was then the Dean of College of Agriculture there in his 3-piece suit and his little wire-rimmed glasses and this eloquent office. I thought I'd gone to see the king. Well, my opinion of deans might have waned a little bit over time, but he was always one of those, and I can very vividly see him. I will have to say deans have been good. I have enjoyed working with a lot of them for a long time. My aptitude test always said that I should be in horticulture. And at that time, there was no horticultural industry. Well, little did I know in about 6 or 8 years after the time I started college what a tremendous horticulture industry budded over here in Middle Tennessee. And I was just through some of that country the other day. It's still very vibrant, very big. So horticulture has really changed. It's changed the face of America. You go through the cities and you just have to admire the horticultural expertise that's out there to get all the beautiful plants and plantings and this kind of thing that are done. So I wound up being a college professor. The last thing on this earth I might have ever thought. I was the most timid person in the world when I went to college. And here I have taught more than 8,000 students, which I think is has some bragging rights in the College of Agriculture. Not very many people would have that. My wife says I'm one of those people that have to teach wherever I go, and I enjoy that, and I think it was a talent. My mother was a teacher, and I didn't know it at the time, but I think it was a talent. Chattanooga brings back memories. 50 years ago, when we came to Chattanooga, we came primarily to bring our produce. That was pigs, cattle, soybeans, and corn. Those were brought in off of the mountain, Lookout Mountain. As you look out in the distance from your room, you probably, if you're in this motel, you can see the mountains and all in the distance. There was a small winding road. You had to come down off of that. And when you got to the bottom of that hill, it was a wreck. I mean, a wreck. There was a river there, and I think it's called the Chattanooga Creek. That thing was the nastiest, smelliest thing you've ever seen. I thought this week when I came through Chattanooga, there was a backup of traffic, horrible traffic problems here. 11.3 miles it extended on the western side of Chattanooga. I just thought to myself, if those poor folks were caught in that over that river during this particular time, there would have been asphyxiation. There's no doubt about that. All the industry of this southern part of Chattanooga was along the riverfront over here, and there was a tannery that I remember. There was a stockyards that I remember. All of the human waste from all of that side of Chattanooga all dumped into this creek just as a raw product. And so as it went out into the Tennessee River, even after the interstate was established, you could see this wide ribbon of black going down through there. So to come back 50 years later, and this is really the first time I've been downtown Chattanooga in that many years, to come back and see the great progress that's been made here in terms of pollution, environment, and all those kinds of things, you have to pat America on the back for having the foresight to take care of a lot of those problems. And this city in particular, I went back just as a research thing on the computer and looked to see what was being said about Chattanooga 50 years ago, and it said it's one of the dirtiest cities in America. And today it's lauded as one of the cleanest cities in America. As a teacher then, I had a great practical background. As an undergraduate student, we were required to take a course in every discipline in the College of Agriculture, and I wouldn't trade anything for that. Having been born and raised on the farm with all that practical experience, it was just natural that I be a practical kind of a teacher. I knew about the Krebs cycle, and I knew the hermit crab did these things and those things. But that was just the information. That wasn't anything I could do very much with. And I still can't and didn't choose to worry a whole lot about those things. There's plenty of people that like to teach about those. I love to teach practical things. I always thought if I know where I'm going, it's much easier to get there. I call that the GPS principle. GPS is great. You got a path there you can follow. You don't know where you're going. What's the use in having it? So I've just been very, very practical. The first class, one of the classes that I always taught and I thought was so good, and just to illustrate how that principle worked, most of the kids that we have in our student body population has increased dramatically, and it's good to hear that other places are seeing agricultural growth. A tremendous amount of interest in the high school, and all these are city kids. These are not rural kids. Our rural kid population is so small that it's just a dent in the population, and it's not where the opportunity is, really. But anyway, I would have the first lab, and I thought, most of these kids never had a beginning and end point. And so I would assign them an awful lot of them a green, unbroken animal. And to see the thought of them having to take that animal and break it to lead in 12 weeks and stand and position its feet and groom it and all those kinds of things just looked like an impossible task. So I thought, the thing to do is to get some broken cattle. And so I had a good friend, Gary Burns, his children, some of you know Matt Burns, a specialist in our state. He always had a string of broken cattle, and he graciously would load those up on his own time and his own effort and bring those. And so these kids got an opportunity to spend 3 hours taking someone's well-broken cattle and just moving them around and standing with them and all this kind of stuff. And there Wilford gets this pretty little girl. She led this animal around for the longest time, and she says, "How on earth do y'all eat these animals?" And I said, "With a fork." And so that kind of broke the ice on that. But to see these kids, they knew where they were going. They knew what it was supposed to look like when they got there. And they took these animals, and it was absolutely a stellar performance. We tore up a lot of stuff, broke a lot of fences, knocked a lot of windows out, got a lot of people kicked and bitten and all that kind of stuff. All a great learning curve. And so I never apologized for that. So many people say, "Well, why don't you take the tech stuff to the, quit teaching that, let's take it out to the tech school." Hey, folks, this is a tech business. We play around with the research and all of these things that are cerebral, but this is a technical business. And if somebody doesn't know how to apply that, I don't know how in the world we're going to get along. So that was always kind of my philosophy. As a freshman, I never will forget one of the early lessons that we had to do with food production. And we were told right from the get-go that probably in your lifetime we're going to run out of food in this country. Now, I also thought about another professor and a comment that he made. He said, "Half of what I teach is not right. I just don't know which half." And boy, there's a lot of truth to that. And so some of the things I say today probably are way off cuff. and forgive me for that. But anyway, he said we're going to run out of food. Well, the fact is we have more food. We're stumbling over it. And you can thank ag research and ag application and all of those things to causing those changes. In the 50s, when I was on the farm, we grew Ogden soybeans. I looked at North Carolina State in 1957. The Ogden soybean was the premier soybean to grow, and production on that was 27 bushels per acre. Last year, I missed a fantastic trip to Iowa, and I will always regret that deeply. I'd always, all my life, wanted to go out there and go pheasant hunting, and finally had a contact, had a neighbor who had been out there before. He was sort of an invalid, but he said, I want to go. I'll provide the transportation. I'll just sit around and enjoy the camaraderie. You guys hunt if you'll go with me. Well, we were going to go. Unfortunately, they made 85 bushels of soybeans per acre, a long ways from 27 bushels to 85. And so what happened was he had all of his equipment, bins and everything tied up with the soybeans overproduction that he had. And so he couldn't harvest the corn. Without the corn harvest, we couldn't go pheasant hunting. So down the tubes that went. We thought 100 bushel corn was out of this world. The record last year was 542 bushels. That's a pretty hefty leap to anybody's imagination. Not only do we have more food than we know what to do with, but we throw 40% of the food away. Ever go to a buffet line and see what people put on their plate and see how much of that goes in the trash can? Nationally, 40% of the food that we put on our plate goes down the drain. It's a shame, but that's the way it is. And then we have all the immense health problems. I can't say that we have fat people anymore because that's not politically correct. So we've moved into obese, and now we can't use obese. I have a friend that's in the human nutrition program, and they say we have to say now that this is a person living in a larger body. So this political correctness is killing me trying to keep up with all of that. But too much food may be our enemy. But the scary thing is what's happening in the world, and it's not with us. You know, our problems are much bigger in the world than just you and I. In Africa, they're expected to have 1 billion people under 18 years old. 1 billion people under 18 years old by the year 2050. Those are, in animal science terms, those are breeders, folks. And 1 million people under 18 years of age are going to create a tremendous chunk of population. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. There have been a lot of changes in life that I like. The health thing is one of the best. I remember as a kid getting real sick. And so back then there were almost no antibiotics. Penicillin was about it. And Mamie up the road had a bottle of penicillin. And so when we got really sick, the family decided, well, we need to get some antibiotics into this kid. So go up there and she gets her old breakdown syringe. It looked about like a basketball pump for you modern folks. That's about what it looked like. But you could disassemble it and boil it and sterilize it and use it again. And she had an old 18 gauge needle about 1.5 inches long. I suspect it had a burr on it because you use that needle over and over and over again. Anyway, she gave me a shot of that, and I have that vivid memory. I was never sick again. So if you want children to get over this wimpy being sick business, just take them up Mamie. She can get you out of that slump, I guarantee you. I've loved air conditioning. Everybody takes that for granted. We had air conditioning in our home about 35 years, I guess, as long as we've had that. Hydraulics. I looked at this souped-up John Deere lawnmower out here. Have you seen that thing on hormones out there? It has $1,000 worth of hydraulic lines on it. I've never seen so much hydraulic capability in my life. We had none of that as a kid. Everything was done by hand. It just dawned on me we were the hydraulics. And so it's just been a real pleasure to know that I could go in a cornfield and harvest that without ever touching it. It's amazing how much hours we spend on doing that. And then the computer with the capability of having instant information, instant contact. I can send you a question, I get a 2-word answer. I like 2-word answers. I don't have to have a long telephone conversation with you and how all the kids are doing and all that kind of stuff. I can get my information and get it real quick. Well, what don't I like, America? I hate this division that we have. Our Congress is might as well not be there. We might as well put 2 people up there and let them vote on an issue. And it's going to be 50% one way and 50% the other, and so it's all over. So what's even the reason for having that? You remember the notion that united we stand and divided we fall? Have we lost that? I would encourage you every time you put something on Facebook to end your statement with, in quotes, united we stand, divided we fall. We got to do something about this, folks. We got to turn this mess around. Everywhere you go, there's division. We have it at work, and we have it in the university systems. Research is the prima donna. Why? Because they bring money in. You got to know what universities are. It brought me great peace to understand what a university is. It's a big business. That's all it is. It's just a great big business. We have this facade of teaching, and that teaching makes the public feel good about we have a place to go and educate the new generations. But the big thing that drives universities is dollars, and that has to come off the research end. We can only tax the people through tuition so far, and we're getting near that saturation point. I'm not sure what we're going to do about that. As our tuition goes up further and further and further, and you're in the same bind with funding. Fortunately for universities, they have research, and they've been very effective in hiring folks that can bring in grant money and so forth, and that keeps them going. I don't like all the diversity issues. Let me tell you what the result of diversity is. It's adversity. And that's primarily what you get out of it. I find it so interesting that California has been so adamant about the diversity and propagating the whole notion of diversity. And which state is it now that's talking about dividing into three? We're going to have Hollywood as a state, and we're going to have the big cities of Southern California as a state, and then we're going to have the agricultural part toward the north as the third state. Good bit of publicity about that, a good bit of talk about that. They can't handle the diversity, so the ones who have pushed it so far, so hard, now don't know what to do with it. They got it, now what do we do with it? So it's a real thing. Look on all your coins, your bills, and so forth. E pluribus unum, that just rings through my head. As we talk about this diversity and talk about all the opportunities that we have to do new and strange things, E pluribus unum keeps coming back. Out of many, one. That's what the original colonies did. We had 13 colonies. Let's come together and become a nation. And that's what we became. That's what we need to do again. So that's another good slogan that you can use. Drugs. Drugs are just such a drag on this nation. China fixed that problem. You won't like how they fixed it because it's not politically correct, but they fixed it. And that may be the only way in the world that we do it. On one end of the spectrum, we have all this talk about building a wall to the south, and the wall to the south may be necessary for many other reasons. I don't like to say it, but I think that's the reality of life. It may be necessary. But we have that on one side, and then we have on the other side all these states now that are approving the use of recreational marijuana, I guess they call it. Vermont's the last one to join that. This is a great extension opportunity for you, I think. In Vermont, you're allowed to have 4 plants, as I recall, 2 mature plants and 2 immature plants, so that you have a continuum of supply. Obviously, we're going to need plants that are 25 or 30 feet tall, that take a special building so that I can grow enough to be really productive. Kind of tongue-in-cheek, but seriously, there will be a lot of extension activity to try to figure out how to maximize that. And then we have other things like Philadelphia. Philadelphia has instituted a hospital-type situation where you can come and there are attendants there to show you how to properly use your injectable drugs. And if it so happens that you overdose, there are physicians on the staff who are there to bring you back to life. This is insanity, folks. The more you put up with something, the more you tolerate something, the more you encourage it. The more you tolerate something, the more you encourage it. And we're encouraging activities that we don't need to have. The social media are killing us. I think, and I hope I'm dead wrong about this, but I think that may be one of the greatest technological changes that we've ever come up with that is detrimental. It may be like lead pipes were to the Romans. They had that great pipe system with lead pipes, and it wound up taking out all the aristocrats who could afford it. And we're losing a generation. We've lost a generation. And I don't know, somewhere here there was a slide, and I'm not sure whether I passed over it. I wasn't paying much attention to that. There was a slide there that had to do with addictions, and we already been there. There was a slide on there that I wanted to call your attention to. It has to do with the nature of addictions. Here we go. This particular one right here, and I'm sorry I wasn't paying any attention to that thing. I can't do but I'm not a multitasker. I can only do about one thing at a time. Anyway, everybody ought to try to get them a copy of this edition of National Geographic. It happens to be September 2017. I call your attention to that because there's 2 things in here of paramount importance. One of those is a science of addiction, and this smartphone, folks, is an addictive behavior. I had lunch this week with someone, and the whole time, it was another couple, and the whole time we talked to her, and the whole time he was on his phone for an hour and a half, nothing but on that phone. Whatever he was doing on there, I don't really know, but could not engage. Ask a question, I'd get a quick answer, and that was it. No engagement, conversation at all. So this is part of the addiction. It's just the same addiction as opioids, just the same addiction as tobacco, all of those things. It all affects the same centers of the brain, so that's a very revealing article. And also in this particular magazine, and I'll come back to it later, is a great overview of some of the technologies in agriculture that happen in the Netherlands. These are just shocking to me to read of these things and to see how far removed and yet how close to our next door those things may actually be. So I would urge you to read both of those. This smartphones is a psychologist's assessment of what's happening to kids, and she said beginning in 2012 she's seen a radical change. The more a kid is on a smartphone, the unhappier they are. Direct correlation. Unhappiness and smartphones directly correlated. So suicide rates, I was interested to see we have a booth out here addressing the ideas of suicide. That's something you're going to have to be very much involved with. I've been involved with some young folks lately that don't know who they are or what they fit in. They use this smartphone to compare themselves to everybody else. And we're not like everybody else. We're all unique. And how in the world we can get that message into their head so that they can bud into someone that's beneficial to our society and to them, but more importantly to themselves, I don't know. But they're honing their skills to be hateful. This smartphone has become a great tool for propaganda. Some intriguing stories about how some great battles have been won now on the battlefields, particularly over in Iran and Iraq. You didn't have any soldiers hardly at all, but you go in there and show pictures of tanks and all these munitions and so forth that you have, and you announce you're going to come and attack someone. Mosul was attacked 3 years ago with a bunch of guys in the back of pickup trucks and guns, and they won the city of Mosul. The troops that were there laid down all their munitions. Just to give you an example of the spoils of the war, these guys riding in these old pickup trucks picked up 2,300 Humvees, thanks to you folks, that we left over there. So this propaganda machine is also a threat. We see that with Russia, but it's more subtle. It's more deep-rooted. It's a process that's infiltrating our kids. Look sometimes at who are leading the riots. See who it is that wants to tear down all the Confederate monuments and so forth. It's 90% kids under 25 years old. So that's a very dangerous group. That group can be manipulated. They have no investment. They have very little sense of history. They're entitled. And all of those things are components that are not good. Now, why would I bring that up to you? Well, I bring that up to you, and I could talk a long time about this immigration mess. I read in the paper yesterday that 170,000 illegal immigrants were caught crossing the border last year. 170,000 of them. Think of how many hundreds of thousands that made it. Once you get over here and get into a city, you're lost, and so you're here. So this thing is really a monstrous problem, and particularly as we think about the challenges, the social challenges that the South Americans have, coming here hunting amnesty, all the problems that they have that we are asked to deal with. These things are immense. And the idea of sanctuary cities, I see all the politicians talk about those. It's all about power and votes. If I have a sanctuary city and I think I can get enough votes in, the scary thing there again is California. California's just signed a law saying that if you have a driver's license, you can vote in California. So what does that do? It gives an immense amount of power to people who are not legally, should not be legally allowed to vote. New York's talking about giving free tuition to illegal immigrants, not your children, but to children of illegal immigrants. So the list goes on. The more you allow bad behavior, the more you encourage it, and we're certainly encouraging it there. Well, these are all social problems, and there's one big family of problems in America that I don't know what we're going to do with. They're all social problems. Our problems are all social problems, and we never solve one. We've got all of these things that are eating on that program, and unfortunately, you're in that mix. Somewhere there's a slide that has a tree coming up with money around the bottom of it. This is the money tree. We're trying to grow in America. Every one of us are. But these societal problems demand money. And where's that money going to come from? And now we're starting, in addition to education, welfare, Social Security, defense, infrastructure, now we're start talking about income equality. Chicago is just fixing to implement a program where 1,000 families are given $500 a month for nothing. Just given to them, hoping that that'll stimulate them to have a better life. And free health services, very definitely coming. Oh, it's scary what the autism changes in this country in the last 10 years. Just scary. We've almost tripled or maybe even quadrupled the numbers of kids that we can identify with autism in a period of about 10 or 15 years. So the health problems are going to force us to more and more health services. All of these things are dollars. So we're all competing for dollars, and in that competition, you're there. You're a social program because you're dealing with people. So how do you compete? I think the biggest challenge that administrators have in the future are money. Now let's change our attention to the thing you came here for, and that's a little bit about extension. I'm not sure of anything I'm going to talk about past this point. I'm going to reinvent the wheel a few times. There's some things that are repetitive. I see you're already addressing a lot of those, and I laud you for the programs that you have. I've read a good many of the poster session things that you have out here, and I've been really intrigued with some of what I found there. We've always said there's only two things that we're sure of, death and taxes. Well, I'm not sure about taxes anymore, so I struck that one off the list. Amazon made $5.6 billion, I'll say that again, $5.6 billion last year and paid zero tax. Zero. So how long can we afford that? How long can we afford it's not the inability, it's just the legality of who pays tax and who does not. But there is a third thing that's certainly a norm, and that has to do with my wife. You've heard of movers and shakers. Well, she's a mover. If I lay it down, she moves it. That's just a sure thing for me. But she's a great lady. In about 24 days, we would have been married 50 years, and I couldn't have picked anyone that would have enjoyed more than 50 years more than I have with her. So even though she moves all my projects around, and I'm a guy with a lot of projects, I have piles and reams of papers and tools and things scattered about, and she's kind of a white couch person. I think she really should have married somebody that liked it clean and neat. Anyway, to you young members here, and I think I'm more sensitive to the young members than I am the older members. The older members are kind of on the other side of the spectrum, and so I'm going to talk a little bit more about young members. I want you to realize that you are the future. So whatever you do today, whatever steps you take, whatever direction you choose to go down, you are the future. Your development, your effectiveness, your ability to learn new facts, to change directions on a minute's notice, all of these things will frame your success. Now, the number one concern, I talk to a lot of people, the number one concern is that we have problems with work ethic in the younger folks. And that gets worse as they get younger. I see it in college, I see it everywhere I go, that we have more and more change in the work ethic. And basically what we have, we think, is a work ethic that won't work. And so I'm going to challenge you to kind of change your mind and change your directions and what you might be doing. Remember that you are the future of the Extension Service. So if it survives, it will be because of what you set forward, going forward now, will be what provides that leadership later down the road that keeps us going. You can thank the smartphones, a computer, and just the societal norms. Most people work from 8 to 4:30 or 8 to 5, something like this. All of those are societal norms now. And so we think we can sit in front of the computer and answer all the questions. Let me tell you that your clients have computers too. Your clients have computers too. That's important to realize because when they call you for information, they probably have exhausted all their ability. They don't know the questions to ask to get to the final endpoint. That's where you come in. Perhaps you can ask better questions. But they have worn themselves out in trying to find answers already. So you're the second level of the computer use. If they know more than you do, don't be intimidated by that. My goodness, everybody knows more about something than I do. That doesn't bother me a bit. It doesn't bother my quest to learn new things at all. So you have to learn to be pretty tough, and that toughness will come as you learn more and more facts. So challenge yourself as much as you can. Your job is about people. It's a societal business. It's a people business. Your job is a salesman. You ought to look at yourself as a salesman. No salesman sits in his office and waits all day for somebody to call and buy his product. He goes out and tells about his product. He gets involved with people in the use of that particular product. And he does this from door to door. He does it anywhere he can, business to business. You've got to do the same thing. So you got to get out of that office, and that leads me to my second point. Extension's a whole lot like war. We have the capability now with the computer and the guided missiles that we have. I can send a bomb right up your shirt sleeve from right here if I have the right technology to do that. But that's not how wars are won. Those things soften up the population. The wars are won by boots on the ground. So your job is about boots on the ground. And you've got to get out there and do that. Let me tell you my favorite extension story, and this is a true story. We had a young county agent in the late 60s, early 70s in South Carolina, and he got a call from a prominent swine producer. At that time, pigs were pretty much kept on the outside. You'd fare a group of sows. When you wean them, they predictably come back in heat in a few days. You would take those to a boar pen. The boar would be out there under his shade, and he would come out, and the mating process would happen in a few days, and so your group's bred, and you move them on down the road. So we do that inside buildings now rather than outside. That's about the only thing that we change. So he had this boar, and he said the boar's been very fertile for a very long period of time. And he said, I can't imagine what's happening because all of a sudden I'm getting no pigs. I'm getting no pregnancies. Everything's recycling. So he said, well, let me come down. He wanted to excuse get out of the office anyway. They didn't have the computer technology and all that. So he was looking for a reason to get out. So he goes down to Joe Mack's farm. And he gets out, and he said, well, let's see what happened. And so they had a group of gilts that they're going to move into the boar, so they moved the gilts into the boar. And sure enough, the boar gets up out of his hut, and he comes out, and he goes through all the romance that boars go through in the mating process. So he finally finds this sow in standing heat, and he mounts her. And just as he gets ready to take action, out of nowhere comes this billy goat. He said he was going 100 miles an hour. He said he hit that boar, bam! And said the boar fell off, squealing. Back to his hut he went, and said he never came out again. The billy goat bred the female, and that was the end of that story. Well, you can look on the computer for the rest of your life, and you're not going to find out what was causing Joe Mack's problem. And that's the reason that boots on the ground are so important. You just got to get out there, and you just got to get out there and get among them. Also remember that your job starts when everybody else's stops. So many of the folks that are involved in the kind of agriculture that I think is the most fertile ground for you to work in, they work an 8 to 5 job. So they're off at nights, and they're off on Saturdays and Sundays. Most don't do anything on Sundays, so really evenings and Saturdays are your time. For the most part, with young folks, that's their recreational time. So you've got to adjust your job to fit them. They're not going to adjust theirs to fit you. Besides that, there's a whole lot more of them. If the majority wins, they need to win that one. So you need to get out anywhere you can that there's an ag connection. You need to shake hands, you need to act happy, you need to kiss babies, whatever it takes to get the job done. Since you're charged with most of the youth activities, I think you have the hardest job that there is. How on earth do you reach these kids? I'll tell you that these kids are looking for nothing to do. They are looking for nothing to do. So it's like trying to recruit a stump to come up here on stage with me. It's going to be a very hard process. So how do you get that done? Well, somehow you have to generate interest, and it's all about generating interest. The smartphone is useless because you don't know who these kids are. You can't communicate with them, and they're not going to call you looking for something to do. So how do you get to them? I see a lot of attempts to get to kids, and I laud all of these. I don't think any attempt is futile. I do think some of them are not going to work very well. I picked up a local paper, and this happens to be a rather rural newspaper, so it had some articles in there about 4-H camps, and I read that with intrigue because those are some subjects that I had not thought about using for a 4-H project, so I was really pleased about that. I think we have to be creative and look for new opportunities. Then I recently went into a Tennessee Tractor Supply store, and here was a bunch of flyers laying behind a nice display, and I lauded the person who put that display together. But there were some black and white things that say something about a particular 4-H camp. I didn't see a single kid in there less than 50. And so the kids are not going to go in and pick these up. So while that's a good effort, and it's not very attractive, it's not going to draw you in. Kids are drawn in, but they're kind of like honeybees. They're drawn in by things they can see or feel or touch, or it's got to be very, very visual for them to get into it. So I think there's some other opportunities. The one that's on your slide now is one that I just happened to see out of a local newspaper. It shows all the local events in a fairly large area that this newspaper would circulate in. It's colorful. It has something on the front that grabs attention. People are going to pick that brochure up. I don't care who it is, and they're going to carry it home and thumb through it and see what's going on. And if they leave it laying on the table next to the TV, they may pick it up periodically and say, well, this Saturday we got such and such. We just spent a delightful weekend in Tennessee because my sister-in-law had seen these kinds of activities and put us together a nice package on Saturday that we really, really enjoyed. So I think that's a place that we can do those kinds of things. So I would urge you to have anything taller, anything that you can get out there. The people that you've got to get to are your volunteers and parents, because they're still in a mode of learning things. They're still in a load of wanting to share things with other people. These kids are looking for nothing to do. They got it right there, and they got all they want to do right there. So you got to, and I think on this kind of thing, you can seek sponsors for that. There's a local ag supply house there of some kind that can help you defray the cost of putting these out. And the nice thing about them is you only have to put it out once for a whole lot of activities. Write anything that you can in a national magazine or in a local paper. We just had an outstanding speaker come to Clemson. It was only published in one place that I ever saw. It was in what we call our market bulletin. And the only problem was that it came to my house 2 days after the speaker had left. And so timeliness is so very, very important, and that should have been in that newspaper a month in advance. I would have been certainly one of them on the front row to see that. As it was, I totally missed it. But our Farm Bureau, local electric co-ops, there are all kinds of places that you can write articles. Let me tell you something I seen. I watched Family Feud, and that's not a cerebral show, I admit that. But I did watch it, and in that Family Feud was 5 people from a big city somewhere. And so they were asked the question, name 4 crops that you see growing in fields in America. And they named one, and that was corn. And they guessed, all the rest of them guessed, and all the rest of them missed. And so they finally went to the survey. Remember, there's always 100 people they say they've surveyed. I doubt that, but anyway, that's what they say. So they went to the survey. Corn was the number one. 85% of the 100 people said that corn was a crop that they always saw. They did get one, wheat, believe it or not. Want to guess what the third one was? Flowers. I've driven all over this nation this year, and I have yet to see the first field of flowers. But to those people in that big city, flowers was a major agricultural crop. Want to guess what the fourth one was? Marijuana. Guys, this drug thing's coming. It's going to impact you just like it's going to impact all the rest of us. There's just a lot of states that are sitting there waiting to legalize marijuana, and it's an entry-level drug with the opioids and all the steps that you can take to get better. We got an immense problem. The more you allow it, the more you encourage it. So what I'm telling you is that the public is just pretty illiterate now of agriculture. So I'm talking to the people in the choir because you're also familiar with it, but so many people are not. So I see you come in here, and I think there's something you've got to keep doing. You share ideas of what works and how you made it work. My boss used to tell me, he said, opportunity rarely knocks but once and almost never knocks the door down. So don't miss out on these things. These are little nuggets, little seeds that are planted for you so that you have some place to go. Go visit programs that are strong. I deal a good bit with the 4-H poultry team just because I have an interest in poultry. Some counties have 25 or 30 kids that have a poultry chain sale, actually, and others have 2 or 3. What's the difference? Why is my program so weak and yours is so strong? Go spend a day or 2 with them. Go down sometime when they have their program in its initiation stages. Go see how they get that done. No reason in the world we can't do that. I would urge you to pile with patients that have with agents that have similar interests. 2 heads are always better than 1, and 4 or 5 are even better than that. Remember, you are the cooperative extension, and that has overtones for you. You need to cooperate with one another. Be a team player. I was always encouraged as a faculty member to do my own thing. I was always greatly discouraged to ever cooperatively work with anybody else on anything, and I thought, what a terrible, terrible style of management that particular thing was. Love your job. Nothing more important than loving what you do. And the more you do it, the more confidence you get, the more you're going to love it. So it's a ball that rolls and gets bigger as it rolls. Get involved. Step out of your comfort zone. You think this is something that I do? I don't do this. I don't do keynotes. Why did I do it then? Well, it's out of my comfort zone. And a long time ago, I found out that if you get out of your comfort zone, you learn things. And I've learned so many things about agriculture, so many things about futuristic agriculture that I would never have known had I not stepped out and done this. So I am tickled to death that I got a chance to do it. You never apologize for what you know, You only apologize for what you don't know. So to go the extra mile, as the old saying says, the path is rarely crowded. People who work the most successful, these guys up here playing this music last night didn't learn that overnight. I guarantee you they play every day. They've played every day for all their life. Michael Phelps got up every morning at 5 o'clock and swam laps until he went to school. He did that day after day, year after year, and look where it landed him. The only power you should ever exercise is power over yourself. In this society of narcissism where we want to power over everybody else, just power over yourself. That's challenge enough for most of us. Learn early to be flexible. I have a good friend that's an extension agent down in Saluda County. He says, you know, I was hired for my beef expertise, and he said, it's the most shocking thing to me. He said, I haven't had a beef cattle question in months and months and months. He said, I get a lot of questions about growing grass, about how to preserve that grass, how to have it analyzed, how nutritionally it fits with the cattle. I talked to my neighbor who has about 1,000 mama cows. He says, my genetics has outpaced my ability to grow food. He said, I am in a real bind nutritionally. So now, instead of being someone that tells you how to raise beef, you're going to have to be somebody that tells you how to make that beef enterprise efficient with what you've got. I have another friend in South Carolina that was a dairy management specialist, and oddly enough, he's wound up now. They've hired him in his retirement to bring a defunct golf course, a major golf course back into action. Why? Because he was trained in management, and by golly, he's getting it done. And he said it's been the challenge of his life, nothing like he ever had in the workplace. I'll tell you that entertainment is not gratifying. You'll find that entertainment's going to leave a great void in your life. It just, I don't know, it's just some hollowness. But accomplishment, working, making a difference, those are the things that are gratifying. And I think that's a well-kept secret. We can't tell you that. I can't tell you that enough. Always remember, do unto others what you'd have them do unto you. If somebody comes to you for help, give them all the help you can give them. You'd expect just exactly the same thing. If you went to the doctor, you would expect him to give you everything that he can possibly give you to help you get in a better state. And that's where you should always position yourself. I want you to look at your users, who those might be. I see some demographics to me. I see a lot of demographics, but some of them are very, very important. The cities, I think, are the new farms. The cities are growing. The countryside continues to lose population. The cities continue to grow, and that's an international phenomenon. So if you ever get into an international scene, you're going to find that to be exactly the same case. I looked at another opportunity, and that other opportunity is in these farms that are less than 50 acres. Realize that your top clientele, and we talked about the 16 farms in Tennessee that are visionary farms, the farms that are taking technologies that we don't now have and going somewhere with those. That is very, very exciting. I do think the bigger and better and more invested farmers are probably going to use you less than you want them to. They're going to go to the people who supply all of this new technology. That's who they're going to try to get their advice from. So I don't want to discourage you from being involved in that. I want you to be involved in that as you can, because you can take that information and put it in other places that are very, very useful. But the small farm, I think, is an extremely great opportunity. Typically, those are hobby farms. They're less than 50 acres. In South Carolina, we have about 25,000 farms. 11,000, almost one half of those, are less than 50 acres. Those are people who are excited about going back into agriculture, often they're hobbyists. Believe me, most of them that I know nothing about agriculture. They'll put 6 head of horses in an acre and wonder why they ran out of grass. So they know nothing about agriculture whatsoever. But they're sponges, they're eager, and they've got kids, and they want those kids to get involved, and they want those kids to have some interest. So if I were in Extension, I'd put all my effort on small farms if I were in the 4-H area. To me, one of the best opportunities to have is a horticulture program. I think every city, every town of any significance ought to have a strong horticultural radio talk program, or even better, a TV program. If you have that program, that's going to affect everybody's got a yard, everybody's got flowers, shrubs, bugs, squirrels, the whole mess. They're going to call into that program for information. So you're going to have a captive audience watching and participating in these things. So if you have a good 4-H activity, you can squirrel tail that right into the operation that's there, and I think you'll get an awful lot of mileage out of it. But the one who works the hardest and the most determined is often the most successful. One of the key ideas is I think you have to deny yourself of today's rewards and focus on goals that will be years from fulfillment. Like this example, I dreamed this one up, and I think it says an awful lot in an awful lot of places. Most everything starts out with a seed, an idea, an ideology, a young kid, that's like a seed. Well, with proper nurture and so forth, proper care, I can grow that into the next image that's on here, and that's a mature being. This is a gourd. I didn't know when I started out with that gourd whether it's going to have a handle this long or if it was going to be a little short, squatty one or a bushel size. Gourds come in all kinds of configuration. So I was a little bit surprised what I get. So sometimes when you nurture a seed, you don't know what you're going to get. It doesn't matter. Just nurture it. That's the thing. And so I had a pile of these gourds laying out there, and I said, well, you know, that's nice to have these gourds. What on earth am I going to do then? And one day I saw a chicken in one, and I said, well, I'm going to take this thing to the next level, and that's what you're going to try to do. You're going to try to take that person or that idea that you've had, and you're going to nurture it to its maturity. But there's a step beyond that, and this chicken on the right is a step beyond that. It's the same one. I went from $1 gourd to a $100 gourd, and that's a gigantic step forward. And that's what you want to do. That's the ambition that you want to have. That's the ambition you want to have for yourself and for the Extension Service. And so I would challenge you to do that. Now, a few words to the senior members, and it's getting me closer to the end, so in case you're dying of pain, we're going to get a little bit closer to the end. Senior members sort of feel like giving my dad advice. I never did know whether he's going to do anything with what I suggested or not, but at least he listened, so I appreciate you listening. I think one of the things for most all administrators, and that being anybody that has someone under them that you give guidance to, there are bosses and there are leaders, by the way, and that's a very big distinction. I never got very much encouragement. I always hated that. When I was a working faculty, we got 10-year recognition pins. And I never will forget, and I call him my boss. My boss walked to my door. My office was 18 feet away, my desk was 18 feet away, and he flipped this thing and it hit right on the desk like a penny and rolled up. He was good at it because he apparently had done it before. He was good at it, rolled right up in front of me, and he said, "Here, I think this is yours." And so it was in a little wrapper, and so I unwrapped it, and it was my 10-year pin. I felt about this big. I don't know why I didn't get up and leave. Encouragement is the easiest thing on this earth for us to do, and it's the thing that we want to avoid. I think we just don't think about it, but we need a lot of encouragement. So he was not a leader, he was a boss. And so I'm talking to leaders, I'm not talking to bosses here. I think we were never trained. I certainly never thought. I wish if I had to go back through the educational process, I'd hit a whole lot of sociology and psychology and things that I hated when I was a college student. Because now I understand that it's all about people. This life is all about people. Anything we do is about someone else. And so I need more information than I have on this complex human being, and I wish I could understand that better. And so I'll call your attention then to a book that I've run across, and I think this is to me is a must read. This has to do with personnel management. This is a book that was written by a person who's an observer. I always tried to teach my students to be observers. I had a neighbor that would drive down a roadway every day, and there was a rock about as big as a basketball, and that rock was totally black. He ran over it with a tractor. He never observed where he was going. He just got on that tractor and went. Well, we need to do better than that. We don't need black rocks everywhere. So this is a book about the 4 tendencies. I'll tell you, it's the only book that I think I've ever read 4 times. I'm just not a reader. I don't go to the movie twice. I just don't do that. I've been there, done that. But this book I've read about 4 times, and it has to do with how we look at life and how we look at expectations. And once you hear the word expectations, you're going to be shocked how many times you hear that said somewhere along the way in your working relationships. Did you ever, for example, wonder, well, I do all the time for others. Why doesn't anybody ever do for me? Or why do some people ask so many questions? I get so tired of all these questions. Or what's wrong with someone who always bucks the system? This person, I have to deal with him all the time. He just saps my energy to have to deal with him all the time. Or how do I work with someone who disregards my leadership? He does just about as he pleases, no matter what I tell him or ask him to do. Well, these are all things that have to do with how we're wired together. And the unfortunate thing about these things is you're born this way and you don't change. So one of the points that I would leave with you is that if you can't fire them, I'll say that again, if you can't fire them, you better be smarter when you hire them. And this book gives me a good bit of insight into do that. And so now I'm an analytical person. I'll walk around. If I talk to you very long, I'll know who you are. And I'll mention 2 or 3 that I've met here this week, and I can tell you exactly who they are and how they think, and I can tell you what they're going to do next. simply by what I found here. This is not only good information for you as a supervisor, it's also good information if you're married and you have conflicting expectations of some kind. Then this book tells you how to deal with that. If you have a child, and a lot of you have children, and a lot of you are going to run into these wrecks all over the place, this book is very insightful in how to deal with a lot of those. So it's just a book that I have spent a lot of time on and really feel a lot about. That's very, very important for us to realize. I would urge all of you. This little book is about $26.95 on Amazon. You can get it in the paperback. Every office ought to have one. Everybody ought to be required to read it. I'm going to start talking first about the obliger. Now, you see these 4 circles, and these are the four expectation categories that this lady has identified. And the obliger is the one I'm going to start talking about. Now, you'll notice the obliger is pretty much stands alone, but there are little interaction circles. And so if you're an obliger, you're liable to have some tendencies toward being an upholder, or you're liable to have some kinds of rebel parts to you. These are important to realize, that there is some interaction. So there's nothing pure about this. There's nothing pure about life. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about the obliger. The obliger is the rock of the world. The obliger is the person that when you have a meeting, he's going to be there. If there's something going on at church, there's 5 people that always show up. There's people here, Patricia, that put together the little newsletter. She's an obliger. She volunteered to put the newsletter together. Why? She knew there's somebody out there that had an expectation of having a newsletter, and so she was gracious enough to step forward and get that done. So they're the rock of the world. They readily meet expectations that other people put on them. They do not have any expectations of their own necessarily. Now, they may develop some or they may not develop any, but they're primarily driven by others' expectations. I'll use my wife as an example. For 18 years, she got up every day, she and her partner, and they walked 3 miles every day, rain, shine, all day. 18 years she did that. The partner announced one day that she didn't want to walk anymore. My wife quit walking. My wife was walking because this other lady expected her to be there and walk with her. And as soon as that expectation was out of the way, she quit walking. She took up something else and headed off in some other direction. So that's what obligers do. They meet outer expectations, but sometimes they have a hard time. So they're your volunteers. They're the guys that meet the deadlines. They're the ones that show up anytime you need somebody to help. They're team players. They're friends. They're spouses. They get along with everybody else, and that's a good thing. So this is a group. If you want to pick a group, this is a group you need to look for. They often take responsibility when no one else did. My daughter said, "Oh, you need some slides for this." I said, "I don't like slides. They're distracting. They don't listen to what I say when they have slides up there. And particularly if you pretty them up too much, they're not going to look at them. Look at me. They're going to look at the slides. Oh, you've got to have slides." She's an obliger. She saw a need that I had that I didn't even know. So she stepped up and took care of that. You ever heard of the person who retires and all of a sudden when he retires he's perfectly miserable? He didn't have any expectations of himself his whole life. His job and his vocation and avocation were the same thing. Those are fortunate people until they retire. So you've seen these folks all over the place. Now, the bad part about an obliger is they're also the ones that are most likely to be exploited and penalized. I know the ones that are always most criticized seem to me like the ones that did all the work. The guys that just kind of come and go in my office, nobody had much expectations of them, and they didn't do very much. But for those of us willing to give till our fingers were raw, we often got the short end of the stick. Why? Because they expected us to do it. We'd been doing it, and they kept on doing it. So they have a phenomenon called the obliger rebellion. And in the rebellion, oftentimes people completely shut down. Let me tell you about an obliger that you all know, Tiger Woods. Why did Tiger Woods become such a great golf enthusiast and a great golf pro? Because his daddy wanted him to. He was an obliger. He was living off the expectations that his daddy put on him. And what happened to him? He hit a crisis point. He had all he could take of that. That's called obliger rebellion, and you know what he went through. A very horrible time. He's trying to come back from that some now, but he'll never be the Tiger Woods he was before that. So the sources of rebellion are often unfair distribution of the workload. You tend to work these people to death. You exploit them. Oh, let Mikey do it. He'll take care of it. He always has. Oftentimes they get no credit for the work they do, and that's the fallacy of the supervisor. You should do better than that. You should encourage them. And oftentimes they just take on more than humanly possible. Just can't say no. These are the people that just can't say no. So you, as a boss, then, have an obligation to teach them how to have some expectations on. Make them take a vacation. Know these folks that never take a vacation? I know people that never took a sick day. They'd be sick as a dog and on the job, and I guess I'm one of them. I just didn't. I felt like I was being paid and I need to be there. You need to teach them how to delegate. That's a hard thing for an obliger to do. He's going to do it himself. He does not delegate. So you'd have to train. It's a part of what your responsibility is, to take these folks that are your workhorses, the kinds of people you want all around you, and make sure you don't kill them off. Now then there's the upholder. The upholder is a little bit different. He's kind of a smaller group, maybe 10% of the population. These folks are self-starters. They're interested in performance. They don't need any supervision. Just give them a job and they'll do it. They recognize their limits. If they commit, they will do it. They meet all of their inner expectations. These are the folks that write notes. These are the nerds, I call them. I'm one of them, so I call myself that. I have a list of notes when I go to bed at night that I know what I'm going to do tomorrow. Those are my expectations. You'll be on that list if you've come to me. So I will heed your expectations, but I also have some of mine. I'm not going to do all for you like the obliger did. I'm going to do part for me and part for someone else. So I have my own needs, and this is the kind of person that is. They make real good bosses because they're real clear about expectations. They don't suddenly change their goals and methods of operation or deadlines or any of those kinds of things. They're pretty solid rocks. We upholders are impatient with people who can't set goals and meet expectations. So why should I do it for him when he won't do anything for himself? We oftentimes have a hard time setting a goal for an obliger. We're very poor at delegating most of the time. I'd rather do it myself, so I'm sure it's done right. That's a rotten attitude, but that's the way obligers, or the way these upholders work. We stick to the rules. If the highway department out here says go 60 miles an hour, we're going to go 60 miles an hour. We're workaholics. My wife says I make work out of going to the beach. We hate to make mistakes, and we don't react very well to criticism. You know these people. I know them because I live in the hull of one of them. So I know exactly what that's all about. Incidentally, there's a test on the computer. You can go and see who you are. You might be surprised at who you are if you'll answer the questions as honestly as you can. Then there's a questioner. The questioner asks questions about everything. They have a deep commitment to logic, efficiency, and commitment. They gather their own facts to decide for themselves. They're against anything that's arbitrary, ill-reasoned, ill-informed, or ineffective. Bosses have got to spell out to all these folks exactly what I expect of you. This is why we're doing this task, this is why we're doing it this way, and this is why we're doing it right now. They often ask very good and sobering questions. Why do we have these silly staff meetings? You ever thought that? I've heard people say it. Why on earth did you pick this software when such and such was out there? Or why waste time hunting this client when you're not going to get anything out of him anyway? Why waste your time on that? They don't like to be questioned. They've done all their own research. They have their own answers. They don't need yours. They make great resources for other people, so there's a place you can use them. You just have to learn how to use them in that place. They don't accept trite statements like, and you've all heard these, oh, we've always done it this way. They're not going to do it that way. Or, this is standard practice. Or, because I'm the boss. If you want somebody to blow up and buck up on you, just take a questioner and try those things on him. So if they don't agree with you on an expectation, they're not going to do it. So these folks are hard to get along with. If I were a boss, I'd want to avoid about as many of those as I could. There's places that they're needed. They don't necessarily make good researchers, by the way. We had one, and my boss called him, or my leader called him Nero. He piddled while Rome burned, he said. He had all of these research ideas, and he just wore them out, but he never got anything off the ground. And so that's what happens. So oftentimes these folks suffer from what we call analysis paralysis. You know the person that goes into the restaurant. I know the person that goes into the restaurant because I go with them sometimes, and they're not in my immediate family. Oh, what kind of sandwiches you have today? And you'll get the whole smear. Okay, let's see. Do you have pastrami? What kind of bread is that on? Oh, could you take that bread and toast it? No, I've changed my mind. I want this kind of bread over here. You're through eating before this person ever gets through all the questions. They've changed it. They've rewritten their menu to suit them. And the worst ever is to order a hamburger and say, leave the hamburger off. That just kills me. So they've done their research. There's one that you know about that's one of these people, Steve Jobs, the great computer whiz. Steve Jobs, when he was a young man, had bad odor, so he decided that he was going to eat nuts and twigs and various kinds of fairy fruits, and that was going to take care of his body odor. All of his cohorts said that didn't work, and so he finally gave up on that. And his inquisitive mind, his questioning mind, made him a huge success. Then as it got toward the end of his life, he got cancer, and he said, well, these doctors, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm going to do the research I can on nuts and twigs and these kinds of things. And so he went through this dietary regime that he was sure was going to cure his cancer. He died from cancer. He would have been much better off to go with the doctors who had the knowledge to do the things that he was trying to figure out. So these things can be catastrophic for these people. I had a boss that was very good. Oftentimes in the faculty meeting, he was asked to do something, so he would appoint a committee, and always, if he wanted that idea to die, he would give it to a questioner that was in the group. This guy would just wear it out until everybody lost complete interest in it. And then finally, we have the rebel, and the rebel is the person that has no expectations at all. I saw somebody on TV the other day. He said, there's nobody going to tell me what to do. I'm tired of being manhandled by these kinds of people. Those people are rarely successful. There is a very interesting thing, though. If a rebel, and you know one, Donald Trump, and the author says that, she says that Donald Trump is one of the most significant rebels that we've had. If that person has an expectation, he's a tiger. He does not turn loose of fulfilling that expectation. And I had the privilege just by accident of picking up a book out of a dollar basket somewhere, and it was how Donald Trump in the year 2000 had written a book on what do we Americans deserve. And guess what? His agenda as president, you can just go through that book. He talked about Korea. He talked about China being such an economic foe of ours and how we're going to handle that. He talked about the immigration issues. Right down the line, he went down the line. And that's the thing that he's talked about. I'm intrigued by what I read in Proverbs. I read in chapter 30 and verse 21, it says there's three things that make the world tremble. Three things that make the world tremble. Number two, a rebel who prospers. A biblical truth in it. A rebel who prospers. Donald Trump has been very prosperous. So this overlapping of tendencies causes some things, and I've talked about the way that you need to look at all of that. This is a McConnellism or a Peteism, as some people call it. I think I can decide who's in each of these categories. And can I go right here on the interstate and do that? You're going down the interstate. Construction ahead, merge left. Half of the people that are going down the interstate merge left, don't they? They're the upholders. The upholders stick to the 60 mile an hour. The obligers say, well, I need to get over here so that we don't have confusion and the bottleneck when we get down to the end. Then there's this group that comes zooming by. Those are the questioners. Why should I go 60 miles an hour? Well, why should I stop now? I know it's 2 miles down the road before we have to merge left, really. So I'm going to run down and get ahead of all these people. Know those folks? And then you have the rebel, and every once in a while the rebel will get, if he's on a motorcycle or even a car, he'll get over on the shoulder and go all the way to the front and then try to cut across in front. Well, I'm an upholder, so if you're in that lane over here and you're going to go down there and merge in front of me, you better make sure your insurance paid up because I'm going to run over. You're not going to cut in front of me. I did what I was supposed to do, and here you are over here slowing traffic down. You have caused the bottleneck because you were better than that. It was about you. You had all these inner expectations for me. And so I cut them off. What does obliger do? He stops and lets them in. If you just cut them off and never let them in, folks, we'd weed those folks out. They'd quit doing that. So you might think about that the next time you're on the interstate. That's a Peteism. Well, I think there's lots of places that we can get information like this to you. I would like to see somewhere in the system us develop more internships and mentorships. And in those internships and mentorships, you have people there who are qualified, who are trained to recognize the personality types that we're dealing with. So that when you hire them, you're hiring a person who is already in the category you want. You want an obliger or an upholder. And so that means that you're going to have to train those folks to do that. The young folks are certainly in a very tough spot. It takes an awful lot of encouragement. Most of our young folks come right out of the city. They come through college. They love agriculture. They love animals and all that kind of stuff. Your young folks are the people that need the utmost need. I've talked to two recently. One of those was put into an area to develop a program, and this person was absolutely lost. This was an obliger person as I analyzed the person after having talked with them. Said I was put out down here by a supervisor. I haven't seen or heard from that supervisor in 4 or 5 months. And I'm just really lost. I don't know what I'm doing right, doing wrong, not doing anything. I just don't know. And I thought, what a shame. You know, supervisors ought to be right on top of the young people. And then another situation that I'm aware of, We had a 4-H specialist job, a 4-H state specialist job. That thing has been filled 4 times in 4 years. So you wasted 4 salaries over 4 years, and you have a program that's not even off the ground yet. That should never happen. We should have analyzed that situation and figured out what's going wrong, where we dropped the ball. Are we hiring the wrong kind of people? Are we having expectations that are unreal? Are we even giving them our expectations? There's a whole list of questions that we could ask based on what I've just taught you here a while ago. So we also need to be aware of what people are doing, I think. So often you just don't know. We can't allow people to do their own thing anymore. I just think that's a very dangerous precedent. So how do you prepare these young agents better? Well, this conference obviously is doing a lot of that, and I'm not even going to talk about that because you got all these posters and special sessions out here where you're bringing expertise in. I do think we need to offer a whole lot more of these mentorships and so forth. Somehow we need to groom a person whose career wants to be an extension, and we simply are not doing that. So we need to do that somehow. Maybe we need to build into system some continuing education courses and make those mandatory. Maybe we need a course for the new person coming into our program that can be put on the computer and everybody in America can use it. A course on program development, how to make that, how to recruit people, how to deal with people, how to start a program and plant the seeds and grow that gourd into whatever it can become. So I think those are things that we need to do. And then I would ask the question, how in the world do we quickly retrain agents to the new technologies? The new technologies are extremely interesting. Next slide, please. The opportunities are, to me, are extremely exciting, and so, since I'm not going to get that slide, there's an awful lot of things that are going on in the Netherlands now. And in this magazine, I told you earlier, there's a huge article in there on agriculture out of the Netherlands. It's unfathomable to me that one of those producers there can, lost the slides, one of those producers there has 175 acres of food grown under glass. Can you imagine the cost of that? Can you imagine the technology that it takes in a cold country to grow food year-round under glass, under 175 acres of glass? And they're doing it profitably. We're on the horizon of having a change in agriculture. We've got 2 big problems. One is water. We're going to run out of water, folks. It's a problem. It's a real challenge. There are years when we were in the big cities are in real trouble right now, so we're going to fix this water situation. We're also going to run out of fertility. We're not going to have P and K around this earth forever in massive quantities like we've had it. And we in this country use an awful lot of that. A lot of that goes down our tributaries and causes other problems and so forth. So either going to have plants that are much more efficient in use of the resources that go into them. I think about grasses and weeds. They thrive in droughts with no water. They thrive with no nutrition whatsoever. Maybe there's hope in manipulation of genes so that we can put that into agricultural crops. If we don't do that, we're going to have to go to greenhouses, greenhouse technology. So you in the supervisory areas need to be ahead of the curve on all of these kinds of things and make sure that you have people being groomed to step into that technology. You don't want to be the followers, you want to be the leaders. And so that's to me, is a very big challenge. So changing technologies, funding, personnel management, immense challenges for you, I think, as you go forward with the changing kind of person that we have to work with. Let's talk a little bit about the demographics, the changes that are happening. Africa is absolutely exploding. It's just phenomenal. Let me give you this figure, and it's such a sobering figure. By the year 2030, 12 years from now, there are going to be 1.2 billion more people on this earth. 12 years, 1.2 billion more people on this earth. Now, I tried to put that in terms, I always try to get back to the practicality of things. Let me tell you the practicality of that. If that 1.2 billion people could survive on a pound of corn a day, let's say they're going to eat cornbread and beans, they can do that and survive. If they're going to eat cornbread, a pound's going to supply about 1,500 calories a day. You need about 2,000 calories a day, and if you're working, you need more than that. So let's just say that 1 pound is a good crude estimate of how much we might have to have. It's going to take 11 billion extra bushels to feed those people in 12 years. Now let's go one step further. That just happens to be the production of the United States in a single year. Right now we're producing about 13 or 14 billion. We're going to need 11 billion just to feed the increase. So this guy that told me as a young student said, you may live to see the day of great food shortages. You know, if I can live to 90 years old, he may be right. I never thought he was right, but he might be right. Can we double our corn production in the next 12 years? You know the answer to that just as well as I do. Who's going to feed them? Somebody's going to feed them. They're going to want you and I to feed them. I can tell you who's going to do it. Then you need to be very sensitive to demographic changes, and I think all of us are. The fastest growing states in America are in the western U.S. Texas, Nevada, Utah, Oregon, and California are your growth states. So those folks that may have had short populations in the past, not all of them did, but some of them have, you're the growth state, so you're going to have a more fertile field for your programs. Florida, the demographics it says it's getting older all the time. Alaska and California are getting younger all the time. So as those demographics change, your programs have got to change. So you've got to be flexible. I told you earlier that one of the hallmarks of your success is going to be your flexibility. And then, of course, just the whole issue of immigration. And as I said earlier, it's an immense problem and an immense challenge, and I don't see us solving it. The South American folks, the Hispanic folks, are going to cover this country up. By the year 2050, the Mexicans alone are expected to be a population of 129 million people in this country. 129 million. Again, let me tell you what that means. You know what the population of Mexico is today? Just about that. So all of Mexico could be up here by the year 2050. Now, for a lot of us, we're going to be dead and gone. But for a lot of you, you're going to sit there and twist those hands trying to figure out what to do about that. The black population is going to grow a little bit. Whites are going to go down. By the year 2050, there's going to be about 438 million people in this country. Whites are going to, today we're 67% white, and by the year 2050, we're going to be 47%. Hispanics are going to increase by about 345% in this country in the next 32 years. So how's our culture going to change? What's that going to do? The Pew Report, which is where I get a lot of these statistics, the Pew Report is very, very concerned because they say that the folks that are coming out of the Hispanic nations are basically uneducated and unskilled. So at least for a generation or two, we're going to have an immense migration of these folks that are going to take all the low-pay jobs that we have now. So there's going to be great strife and great conflict in these cities between the socio-economic folks that are in trouble now and this new wave of people that are going to move into those cities and compete with them for those jobs. So we have to ask ourselves, what's our culture going to look like? Are we going to speak Spanish? Are we ready for that? Or what are our career opportunities? Are the Spanish-speaking people going to need us at all? They're going to be a very significant part of our population, so let's hope that they do. Well, the last slide that I would put up here today has to do with someone's perspective, and go to the next one, please. Yeah, this is one I wanted you to see, and it to me was just a slap, just a bang up against the side of the head. Project Earth must produce more food in the next 40 years than all the farmers in history have produced in the last 8,000 years. Wow, what can I say? Sounds like job security for you guys. I like that. Well, let me wind this thing up. There's a few features of speeches that I've always been intrigued by. Your butt will only absorb what your mind will let it, so I'm sure I've stretched that to some unimaginable length already. If I ask 50 of you when I get out of here, I'm going to stand over here in the door maybe and ask 50 of you, tell me what that talk was all about. I won't ever get over 2 or 3 sentences. You go to a sermon on Sunday, ask anybody what was the Sunday school lesson about, what was a movie about 2 or 3 or 4 sentences. So I'm sorry that I couldn't condense it down to that much. But there is some reality in that. There are certain things, and no two of you have probably gotten the same thing, and I suspect that's the reason that we give speeches. Then there's always the thing that could happen, and I thank God and I thank you that it didn't happen, and this is a true story. My wife worked in the tourism industry, and one year they were going to celebrate a person who had had a major impact on the tourism in the Clemson University area, ball games and all the things that are part of that scenario. And so this person was going to be honored for that, and I don't know who chose them or what happened, but anyway, the speaker was very, very inappropriate. He was talking about a book that he had written, and it was not a book of any interest that we could tell to anybody in the audience. So everybody was sitting there with a long face waiting for it to be over. And all of a sudden, this booming voice came across and said, "Who the hell is that feller?" And everything just kind of stopped, including the speaker. And so the lady that had brought him there kind of bent over and whispered in his ear or something, and he said, what in the hell is he talking about? And that wound that speech up in a hurry, let me assure you. So thank you for not doing that to me. I appreciate your courtesy. I'm going to close with 2 or 3 quotes. I've always liked quotes, and I stick some of them in my drawer so that I can use them somewhere along the way. And these are some of the ones, and I'll have to, with my eyesight at my tender age, I'm going to have to get closer to read it. And I forget my handy assistant here. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. That was Winston Churchill. I like that one. I'm going to have to let you read that one. I don't have a copy of it in front of me. The purpose of life is not to be happy. I bet most of us are told that the purpose of life is to be happy. It is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have made a difference, that you have lived and that you have lived well. And amen to that. I just think that's such a significant quote. And then I have had to join the ranks of some of these. We went to West Tennessee recently, and we went to Elvis's home. And I was intrigued as we went through Elvis's home at all of the things that he had. He had a mansion. He had a museum there that had all these gold records, a whole wall full of them. He had cars, he had motorcycles, he had boats. Things of life, he just was inundated with them. I think he had like $6 billion worth when he died. And he died at 42 years of age. And I said, what a catastrophe that a man would strive to have all of these things, and yet at 42 years of age, he chose some things that he shouldn't have chosen, and it wound up killing him. And I thought in all of that process that, you know, the joy is found not in the pursuit of an idea or an ideology. The joy is found. Again, I can't read it that far. I should have had a copy of these things. Joy is found more in the pursuit of an idea or an ideology than it is in the achievement. And I've thought a lot about that. I think that's a good quote. It's just a whole lot more fun to run the race than it is to win it, because all of the competitive things that we have in life are happening as we get there. When we reach that final finish line, it's just a void, and that covers that to me. So I appreciate your attention. Let me say how much I appreciate what Extension has meant in my life. I've tried to contribute as much as I can to that in some auxiliary way. I still lean on Extension. I still call folks. I've had some problems that I just didn't think you could solve, and a fellow in Florida solved one of those for me after extensive research, and I appreciate that so much. I went to a fire ant overview recently, and that's one of the best half a days that I've spent in a long time is understanding those suckers and how to deal with them. So I thank you for what you've contributed to my life. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you.
Get my notes back over here. Hang on just a minute. Make sure I get to the right spot too. Pete, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for sharing a lot of thoughts with us. You've given us a whole lot to think about today, a lot of good information. And I want to especially thank his spouse, Joe, for helping us with this program, helping him put it together. And she was his clicker today, helping him keep on track. Well, you see, I want to tell a little other story, too, about the side of this. Pete is also an accomplished carpenter. And he's known for his carpentry work back home, the many jobs he's done with that. And a little side story to that is recently his wife Joe was in their house and ran across this large trunk. He knows what I'm about to tell. And she was going to move this trunk and found out it was too heavy and she couldn't move it, so she opened it up and found Pete's collection of hammers. So and these aren't his working hammers, these are his collection hammers, so he's held on to those. So I decided that, Pete's got a collection of hammers, but the one thing that he did not have until today is the one and only golden NACAA hammer. So I wanted to send him away with a little special gift today that he can hopefully remember his time with us today, and we
Thank
greatly
you.
appreciate you, Pete.
Thank you.
One more thing. One more thing in the interest of full disclosure that I want to make sure at least I've shared with others, because I know some of my board members know this already. You see, I met Pete 38 years ago, a little almost that, when I was invited to go on a picnic by his younger sister. She invited me to go along, so I got to meet Pete and his family. Well, his younger sister, Mary, has been my wife for 36 years. So along with being a good speaker, Pete's also my brother-in-law, and I wanted you to understand how fortunate I feel to be a member of a family such as this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pete.
Likewise.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it, buddy. We've got a few more details to take care of in this morning's session, and they'll move right on through, so we'll be done in fairly short order, but they are important portions of the program. We have a special recognition that we're going to do today, and I've asked Mr. Mike Reeves of Alabama if he would assist me with this by escorting Mr. Charles Moody to the stage. While they're coming up, I'll explain a little about this. Mr. Moody was an extension agent in Cherokee County, Alabama. In that area, he was referred to quite often as Mr. 4-H. He was known for his 4-H members and their judging teams and how they excelled each year. He was also an ag agent there as well. I should emphasize that too. He's been an avid supporter of our scholarship programs. Under Mr. Moody's leadership, the AACAA, the Alabama Association's Youth Scholarship Program, was initiated in 1990 to provide for the children and grandchildren of the Alabama Association members and their life members. He was so integral in the establishment and growth of that fund, it was renamed the AAS Charles R. Moody Youth Scholarship Award. It now provides over $5,000 in annual awards. He served Alabama for 15 years as their association scholarship chair for their association, and was the first Alabama member to have been recognized as having donated over $1,000 to the NACAA Scholarship Fund. He has been a committed member of NACAA, and this year we want to recognize him for a milestone that very few members can claim. Mr. Moody was hired in July 1 of 1968 and attended his first NACAA meeting in Louisville, Kentucky. You see, today, this meeting is his 50th consecutive NACAA annual meeting. And on this occasion, I want to recognize it with two things. Number one, we created a special certificate. I'm not sure one has ever existed like it. I ran this by the board, and the board had agreed with us doing this. And I'll read it to you, Mr. Moody. It says, the National Association of County Agricultural Agents, Special Citation of Merit in recognition for attendance at 50 consecutive annual meetings, presented to Charles Moody of Alabama, 2018. Now, you and I both know, she's trying to get a picture of us. Now, you and I both know that you've probably got walls full of plaques. So I wanted you to go away from this meeting with something that was just a little beyond just a plaque. And in this bag, and we'll let you open it later, is a special glass item, glass bowl that was created up the street by the professional glass blowers at the Ignis Glass Shop. So that's something you can enjoy for years to come, we hope. Mr. Moody, you've been a special member. We thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. Next on our program this morning is the presentation of our Hall of Fame Awards. As most of you know, this is a very special award in our association. Only 4 of them are presented at most each year. To handle the details of those presentations, I will call on our Recognitions and Awards Committee Chair, Mr. Stephen Hadcock.
NACA members, family, and friends, it is my pleasure to, as your Recognition Awards Chair, to recognize this year's Hall of Fame recipients today. Before I have that honor to read a brief biography of each Hall of Fame recipient, I would like to extend my appreciation for the sponsorship of this award by Pipeline Ag Safety Alliance. Representing the Alliance this morning is Mr. Chris Tome. Mr. Tome, would you come forward and offer a few comments?
Good morning and thanks. The mission of the Pipeline Ag Safety Alliance is to protect your clients, our communities, and our nation's buried infrastructure. So we hope that you'll take a couple minutes this week, connect with one of our members in the expo hall, and learn how you can help. We appreciate you and give us a chance to say thanks in person.
So let's get to it. Thomas Tom Hanson Braddock enjoyed a 38-year career with Duval County Extension. The first 10 years, Tom worked as a 4-H agent developing a county-wide 4-H clubs, as well as coaching livestock and land judging teams. After receiving his master's degree in animal science from the University of Florida, he was a multi-county dairy and livestock agent serving Duval, Nassau, Baker, Clay, and St. Johns counties. In 1975, Tom became the county extension director for Duval County and retired in 1995. During that time, he served as president of FACAA, formed and chaired the Northeast Florida Water Advisory Committee, and organized the Jacksonville-Duval Agricultural Council. Since retirement, Tom has served as Duval 4-H Foundation Director, President of Duval County's Cattlemen's Association, Vice President and Board Member of Duval County Farm Bureau, President of the Greater Jacksonville Fair Association, just to name a few. Tom also stays busy managing a 391-acre farm comprised of beef cattle and timber lands. He practices silviculture, growing timber for both pulpwood and saw timber. He has received multiple awards during his years of service. Tom received numerous awards from FACAA, ESP, Florida Farm Bureau, Duval Soil and Water Conservation District, and Gamma Sigma Delta. He has also received the Outstanding Agricultural Leader Award, Mayor's Agricultural Leadership Award, and was inducted into the Florida 4-H Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, Tom was not here today to receive his award in person, and accepting his award on his behalf is Tom Sweat.
As mentioned, Tom could not be here today due to medical issues. His doctor would not allow him to travel, but he did want me to thank everyone for this very prestigious award. And he also, he's been retired for 23 years now, and as you can see, he's been very active. But he wanted to mention to the younger agents to be sure and become involved in your professional associations and use the leadership opportunities to expand your involvement in the associations. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to receive this on behalf of Mr. Tom Braddock.
Daniel Konczynski was an outstanding scientist, educator, administrator, and mentor, and touched and influenced the lives of so many. He had a thirst of knowledge and derived a great joy of satisfaction from helping others. Dan worked tirelessly for Rutgers University for 29 years, with his career progressing from agricultural agent to Agricultural Natural Resources Department Chair, and then to Associate Director of Extension. Dan's programmatic efforts were focused on agronomy, sustainable agriculture, and soil amendments. He was also dedicated his time and experience to NACAA and sat on and chaired several committees at the state, regional, and national level over the years. Dan's educational materials on program evaluation helped many people track the impact of their extension programming, and those materials were especially important for new extension faculty and staff. He always put others before himself and was a devoted uncle, friend, mentor, and colleague. His positive attitude, kindness, boundless energy, and caring nature will be missed by all those who know and love him. Although his fight with cancer included many challenges, Dan always kept his wonderful smile and sense of humor. His strength, optimism, and passion for life and for learning was and will be an inspiration to all who knew him. the 2018 Northeast Region Hall of Fame recipient, Daniel Kaczynski. Accepting the award on Dan's behalf is his husband, Brad Bradering.
On behalf of my husband, Dan, I would like to thank you very much for this tremendous honor. It's an honor for Joe, our oldest nephew, and me to be here to accept it. I only wish that Dan was here to accept this award for himself. This award is especially meaningful because Dan is being recognized by his peers. Dan joined NACAA the year that we met, 1988, and this organization has been an important part of his life, career, and professional growth ever since. Through NACAA, Dan met people in Extension from all over the country and made friends who supported and encouraged him. He looked forward to attending this meeting every year. Dan had an outstanding career and excelled at everything he did, winning many awards and honors. Advancing the field and sharing knowledge among peers was a large part of his life. Dan chaired numerous committees at Rutgers University, and was extremely active in NOFA, the Society of Agronomy, Epsilon Sigma Phi, the Grain and Forage Producers Association, and NACAA, of course. One of the honors that was especially meaningful to him was the CEBA Search for Excellence in Crop Production Award, which Dan won in 1994 for his research. This award included a trip to Switzerland where he met with the Secretary of Agriculture, traveled throughout the country, and visited various farms and production facilities. Dan came back so excited by his experiences, what he had learned, what he could incorporate into his research, and what he wanted to share with others. Dan was mentored at Rutgers by Dr. Anicki, who encouraged a city boy to pursue a career in agriculture. A decision that would shape Dan's life as he became a champion for agriculture and later in his career for early career development and mentoring. I urge you to carry that legacy forward. The impact that Dan had on others became truly apparent as I read through the notes and messages that I received upon his untimely death. One note that truly touched me was from the mother of a Rutgers colleague. It read, "Myself and my daughter owe a great deal to Mr. Kluczynski. He guided my daughter and taught her how to be the best that she could be." Although his fight with cancer included many challenges, Dan did keep his smile and his positive attitude. Another colleague wrote, "There are special people we come across in life, and Dan was in that constellation of stars. The world is a far better place for Dan having been here, and we are all better for having known and loved him." Thank you very much for this wonderful recognition and for all that Dan did for NACAA. Thank you.
During Milton Green's tenure as an educator, he demonstrated a commitment, dedication, and effective leadership in job performance. Getting his start as an agricultural extension and 4-H educator, he led many efforts to improve the program in Wyoming and the counties he was employed in. During the mid-1980s farm crisis, he was instrumental in helping support a farm crisis hotline for Wyoming farm families in financial stress. He did much of the work in Native American territories in both Utah and Wyoming and served leadership positions in both states. Milt was very involved in both NACAA and WACAA. He has been a member of both associations for 31 years. He has held many offices and chaired committees in both the state and national associations. He served terms as the secretary and president of the State Association. He was the national chair of the Ag Economics and Community Development Committee, and he was the Western Region Vice Chair for Sustainable Agriculture Committee. He served both on the AA and DSA awards. He received both the AA and DSA awards during his tenure with Extension. He has and continues to attend NACA AMPICs and serves as a life member committee chairperson for the Wyoming Association, as well as the Western Region Vice Chair for the Life Members Committee. Milt continues to be of service to his community and has participated in many activities outside of normal extension programming. He has been involved in the Lions, Rotary, and Elks Clubs. He was a board member of the After School Alliance in Lander, Wyoming. He donates his time as a benefit auctioneer to many nonprofit organizations. The 2018 Western Region Hall of Fame recipient, Milton Green.
Well, I think the first thing I need to do is start with thank yous, and I thank my home association or Wyoming Association for bringing my name forward. This is unquestionably the most humbling award of my achievement, my career, and I'm so appreciative of the Western Region, Wyoming, and the whole NACA board, President Galloway, for supporting this award. And I guess the other thing that I'd like to say is that all of us, I think, realize about midway through my career, I realized that the land-grant university system was a gift. It was a gift given to the United States of America. And it's relevant. It has been relevant. It has to continue to be relevant for the survival of the United States. And with that, I guess the only other thing I'd like to say is that I think this stage could be filled side to side and front to rear with all of the folks that helped me get to this point. And to all of those people, thank you. I love you all. My wife and family, I guess that's over those over 30 years of career, there was a lot of sacrifices, and I thank you for putting up with those for that long and putting up with me. So, thank you.
Gary W. Wilson's contribution to farm families and businesses throughout his extension career has been nothing less than exceptional. Until his retirement, Gary was an active member of the Ohio State University Extension Forage Team, Agronomics Crops Team, Sheep Team, and Ag Manager Team. Gary has effectively worked with rural and urban audiences to solve a variety of production, economic, and social issues. Partnering with the University of Findlay, Gary maintained 60 different forage variety plots and investigated rotational versus continuous grazing and grazing preferences by horses. Gary provided leadership for many of the OUSU extension. While County Director, the Hancock County Commissioner supported the budget increases equaling 146% during his tenure, and he was very instrumental in building the new County Agricultural Center. Hancock County also benefited from volunteers coordinated by Gary through his Master Gardener and Ohio Certified Naturalist programs. More than 200 volunteers have been trained, providing more than 35,000 hours of documented time to the community. Gary's humanitarian record is also outstanding. He has been a Sunday school teacher for 44 years, chairman of the church congregation, a 4-H advisor for 35 years, and has worked regularly with a local organization to raise money to prevent child abuse. A major program promoted by Wilson was the Community Heart and Soul, a movement to revitalize small cities and towns in rural America. 2 towns in Hancock County received a combined amount of $300,000 in grant funding for this program. The North Central Region Hall of Fame recipient, Gary Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, NACAA, all my family and friends, my wife, all the friends and colleagues from Ohio, specifically Ed Lentz and Chris Brunis and other ones that helped administrate this award. A lot of you know we are never, ever any better than the people that surround us, and we have great people here today. I've gone to over 3 decades of these meetings, and we spent all our family vacations for many, many years coming to these meetings, and we still enjoy immensely coming to these meetings. And I'll close with a quote from Zig Ziglar. A lot of you may know him, a motivational speaker. He says, "We can get everything we want out of life if we just help enough other people get what they want." Thank you very much.
This concludes the Hall of Fame recipient acknowledgement, and I now turn the podium back over to President Galloway.
Thank you, Stephen. To close out this session, we need to make sure we're updated on anything that might have changed since we were updated last night. So I want to call on David Yates, one of our co-chairs, to update us on anything we need to know about. David?
Just a few quick reminders today. Again, the luncheon for the Excellence in 4-H Programming was room 16. That's just next door to 15. Don't go to the wrong room. Life members business meeting, you are in room 4 instead of the banquet room J. Skip that. Remember that there's a number of lunches going on at 11:45 this morning, it's morning. Be sure to look at your book, make sure you've got your ticket for that. In the gift bag, make sure you go through it. There's a lot of different things. But there is a pocket knife in that gift bag. And for those of you who are flying, our friends at TSA may not like that pocket knife if it is in your carry-on bag. So if it is, you need to put it in your check bag, or we'll find a way to get that to you. But again, it was in a little box. You may have overlooked that. Remember, tonight we have our Southern Region dinner that starts at 4:30 as the first seating. And then tonight, after that, we'll follow with the 4-H Talent Review at 7:30. You will not want to miss this. We have a wonderful and highly talented group of young people and a great group of people that are putting this show together for you tonight. And finally, we ask you, there is the newsletter. The members are receiving a copy of this electronically, but there are also paper copies distributed throughout the convention center. Be sure to pick up a copy. There's a lot of good news in here. There's a lot of updates in here. And we also ask you, if you're using any social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we've got our tags on that, so we'll be able to share information among each other. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the updates. With that, folks, we've had a great first general session this morning. Enjoy the rest of the day. Don't forget at the exhibit hall and all the good luncheons and sessions we'll have this afternoon. Thank you very much. Session is closed.
Lord, you go insane if you give in to it.